All righty, gentlemen and ladies. I noticed in the algorithms we've got a few ladies starting to watch the show, which is awesome. If y'all can, please like and subscribe to the channel and like the show. That helps get the algorithm going, so other people interested in the subject can find these great interviews. I've been excited about getting this particular guest on for a long time. He was initially, I wanted him to be one of the first guests on, but with the computer issues I had and the amount of photos and videos that we're going to be showing today, it was just not possible. So sadly, he's been bounced back, but we've got him here nonetheless, and it is going to be outstanding because we've got retired Major Jim Grimshaw. Mr. Jim was with the 173rd. I know I'm going to skip, but for the highlights, he was with the 173rd. He was with 5th Group. He did an A-team tour, I believe, at Budop. He was at the MACV Recondo School as a cadre member. He's Ranger qualified and is a recent class of 2022 or 2023 Ranger Hall of Fame. So we have a wonderful guest, and not to mention a actor who actually was one of the first, if not the first, military advisor on Magnum PI with Tom Selleck. So we've got a lot of stuff to get into, and without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Jim. Mr. Jim, I hope you're having a great morning this morning.
Well, I am. Thank you, Bud, for having me. I appreciate it. We got the technical difficulties out of it. And so anyway, just, real quick, let folks know that I started out as an enlisted man in the 82nd Airborne Division. There's a lot, and I didn't stay long as an enlisted man. I went to OCS. I had a very good first sergeant, Robert Patrick Kearns, who decided early on that I needed to go to OCS. So anyway, and then I went to Ranger School, back to the 82nd as an officer, then the Special Forces at Fort Bragg, 6th Group. And then as soon as I graduated Special Forces Officers course, had orders to go to 5th Group. As you mentioned, I went to boot up. And then Colonel Kelly, the 5th Group commander, picked me as one of the guys to be on the original cadre of the MACV Recondo School. I actually held about 3 or 4 different positions I was a junior captain at the time, and as other more senior captains came in, I relinquished titles to them, thank God, and the responsibility. I signed for that Mike Force compound next to Project Delta. We lived in Project Delta for a while and operated out of there. So I take a lot of credit. I'm very proud of this. I designed and built that compound, and then I went to the Ranger Department after that. Didn't stay very long. We had a short turnaround time for captains. As you mentioned, I went back to the 173rd. I commanded an infantry company there, and then I went on to different things like. They started the all-volunteer Army. I was in Fort Sheridan, Illinois, the Midwestern Regional Recruiting Command the first 2 years. We're really some great people, nice area, a lot of good restaurants, etc. Chicago area. And hated the winters, and I hated my job. It was a terrible job. And so I went on to Thailand to the Joint Casualty Resolution Center, where I worked with some very fine people. And then back to 7th Special Forces Group, and ultimately I ended up in the CINCPAC J36 Special Operations, which in 1983 we switched over. I'm a plank holder for Special Operations Command Pacific. My primary job there, along with others, but my primary job was to work on the team that we got the. And I use the word "we" because it took a lot of work by a lot of people. But I was one of the lead guys for a while with getting the 1st Special Forces Group reactivated and one battalion back into the Pacific Theater. Jim Estep came in and took over from that. I stayed in exercises, and then I retired. And while I was in Hawaii, I did a play in Honolulu Community Theater, and it was the first full year of Magnum PI, and the casting lady was in the audience and asked me to be an extra. And then about a year later, I got my first acting role, and by that time, I had established myself on a program as an extra. And one of the directors got to know me, and when they came out with he called me the day before I was going down for the acting role, and said, make sure you wear your uniform with all your badges and so forth tomorrow, because we're looking for a military technical advisor. They're going Universal Studios had just approved the very first 2-hour episode. So off and on for the next 4 years, I was the military technical advisor. And then over a period of time, to include right after I retired, I went back to Hawaii and I did a 2-hour special as an actor and a military tech advisor back in late 1984. Really had a great time. Some great stories, as you can imagine. It was a win-win situation for the military. Some people didn't like the idea that I spent some time on the program. Others reveled, and they regaled it, because it worked out just very nicely. We did a lot of great things, and when I would go on some of my trips overseas to Malaysia and Thailand and Korea in my special ops jobs, I was called the movie star by some of these Thai special colonels, and we had some great times over that. I had a lot of fun in that job, as you can imagine. I was on jump status in Hawaii, going back to Thailand and Malaysia and Korea and the Philippines. What more could an aging major want at that time? So anyway, that's quickly my bio. It doesn't get into all the details, but maybe we can talk about some of these things as we go along here. You got my bio. As I presented you a couple things, so I don't know what you want to do with all that, but hey, I'll throw it back to you.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to. I've got a ton of photos that after we get some questions done and all that, we are huge fans of photos. As people know, I've got about $1,400 worth of SOG photo books and Special Forces photo books back there. So we all love good photos, and you have some absolutely amazing photos that you've been ever so kind to let us use today. But just to keep the ball rolling before we get into the end, when we're going to start showing some photos, but I'll show them all along, guys, so y'all can see Mr. Jim. While
we're talking about the subject of photos, let me tell you a quick story while you're getting
absolutely
get that organized. Earlier this year, my daughter, who now lives and her family now lives in Canton, Georgia, just above Atlanta. She kept writing me on email saying, "Hey, Dad, send me a copy of your orders for your awards. Send me a copy of photos." And I was curious because my daughters, they've always had a certain level of interest in my military career, but this was sort of intense, if you will, in a short period of time. So I didn't realize what she wanted, but anyway, she made a deal. She submitted me to be the Atlanta Braves hometown hero. And so on the Saturday of the Armed Forces Day ball game, during one of the between the innings, they had me go out on the field, salute the fans, and they showed a lot of these photos, and they made a video. See, it showed on the jumbotron. And a lot of people didn't see it because it was during a commercial break. But I was that Saturday night, free tickets. I was a hometown hero of the Braves, and one of my actor buddies was in the stands. He has season tickets. I immediately got a Facebook thing and said, "What are you doing here in Atlanta?" You know, and so forth. And it was a fast moment. It was a cool moment, and I throw that out there because I want to thank my daughter very much for what she did for me.
Absolutely. And while we're doing that, I've got that video. So how about I just go ahead and show that video while
Yeah,
we're here.
yeah,
Let's
that's cool.
do let's do that. That is a wonderful
That will
there
probably set up the program more than anything else.
where is my Facebook? Bear with me, guys. I apologize. There we go. Let's see here.
Infantrymen in 1961. Women.
Oh, bear with me, guys.
Proudly support our nation's military and pay tribute to the men and women who sacrifice daily to protect our freedom here at home and abroad. Tonight's hero joined the Army as an infantryman in 1961. He eventually joined the Special Forces and went on multiple deployments to Vietnam. In May of 1966, after a combat assault on a landing zone in a Vietnamese village complex, he single-handedly neutralized a Viet Cong heavy machine gun position and captured an enemy ammunition bearer. Despite being injured to his arms and legs by a grenade, he continued to fight and was awarded a Purple Heart for his valiant actions. This hero was awarded many notable medals throughout his career, including 2 Bronze Stars for valor. He was inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame in 2021 and will be inducted into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame this June. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome home our hometown hero from Townsend, Georgia, Major Jim Grimshaw.
Wow. Look at that crowd.
Thank you for your service.
God.
Fort Dealer proudly support our nation's military.
Wow, that is just outstanding. That was such a good video too of them putting that together. I can't imagine how you must have felt getting to step out there like that. I bet that was just overwhelming with emotions.
It was, and the cool thing was just before I went out on the field, they have a director there that does all this for you, gets you squared away with it. And anyway, I'm sitting with the Braves president and his wife, talking with them real quick, and the guy gave me a challenge coin from the Braves, and then after that little moment on the field, because that happens real fast, and stepped off, and they had like a lady there with a wheelchair so they could wheel me up through the elevators and all this kind of stuff through the clubhouses. And anyway, she said, "Turn around," and then Brian Snitker, the manager of Braves, was yelling at me, and so I saw him and Eddie Perez, one of the coaches, and so I saluted them, and I said, "Go Braves!" And the Braves lost that night. So.
Oh no, gosh. I grew up on the Braves. Those 90 teams with Fred McGriff, Ryan Klesko, Chipper Jones, Smoltz, Glavine. That, in my opinion, I do love the Yankees, even though people give me the sacrilegious look. But you can't beat those Braves teams like that. And for you to be honored at the new stadium like that and having your daughter set that up, that's when I found that, I knew I was going to need to have that ready. That was just very, very moving. And thank God the Braves do stuff like that. They're very good about honoring veterans. And thank God you were one of the vets that they've honored. Just outstanding. Well, while we're gosh, that's such a great video. I'm gonna have to share that on my social media. But let's see here. We've gotten okay, so when initially we're going back in time here, you initially enlisted, was it in early 60 or was it before 1960 when you initially?
September 18th, 1961.
1961. Okay.
Yeah.
And in 61, of course, Vietnam's already not already going off, but it's happening. Y'all don't know much about it. I can't assume, and especially a young guy coming in. But this is going to be a two-parter. Were you anticipating going off to fight, and were you intending to eventually look for special forces, or did you even know anything about that yet?
Well, as a young soldier at that particular time, we were more concerned about the Berlin Wall that went up. Okay. I was working for 3M Company for 29 months before I joined the Army. And it was a nice job, well paying, but it was sort of a nowhere job since I didn't have a college education. And friends of mine who were already in the service reminded me that the Berlin Wall went up in August of 61. And they said, if you're ever going to go into service, this is the time to do it, because they're going to draft 19-year-olds. So I chose the Army because it was only 3 years as opposed to the other services, which were 4. And my intent was simply to go in the Army, do my 3 years, get out, go to college on GI Bill, and become an actor. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to be at the time. And when I didn't know what I wanted to be when I joined the Army. So as I walked into the recruiting office, there was this almost life-size cardboard cutout of a Sergeant E5 in the 82nd Airborne Division patch, leaping out of an airplane, and the parachutes open. It was a big life-size thing, And I walked past it. And I said, "That's it. That's what I want to be," And the other thing about it is that while we were in advanced infantry training, special forces recruiters came in, and so I volunteered to go to special forces as an enlisted man, and we were on a group travel bus, my good buddy Art Tucker and I and others, and we're on our way from Fort Benning to Fort Bragg, and it stopped in Columbia, South Carolina. So here I was, the Army's latest, biggest, and baddest paratrooper, and with my shiny Corcoran jump boots and so forth. And I decided I decided that I wanted to get off the bus and go back to Savannah, Georgia, and spend a weekend in Savannah. First of all, visiting some relatives, but more importantly, I had an ex-girlfriend who had ditched me when I was in basic training, and I wanted to go knock on her door and show her that I was now a big bad paratrooper, and I did, and it was stupid to do that, and yeah, there I am as a young enlisted guy in the 82nd. And so this is how I got to the 82nd. So I found my way to Fort Bragg the next day in the middle of the night. I woke up Art Tucker and I said, where's my duffel bag? And he said, it's in the sergeant major's office. So the next morning I did a lot of push-ups in my Class A uniform for the sergeant major. I stood before Colonel Miley, and he looked at me and he said, "Private Grimshaw, you will never be in special forces ever." So they kicked me out of special forces before I ever got in. And I spent 30 days in what could be best described as a disciplinary barracks, and I did a lot of work. I learned about mess halls from the grease trap up, and I was harassed. I had a guy on me all the time. I received an Article 15, and then I ultimately ended up in the 82nd Airborne Division, and that's where I got a fresh start. And the rest is history. I can remember Colonel Miley telling me that Private Grimshaw, you will never be in special forces. And I ultimately ended up as an officer serving in 3 different special forces groups, plus other SF assignments. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow. I can't believe, I mean, right off the bat, he's already saying you're never going to be in special forces.
Well, I screwed up royally. There was no doubt about that, you know. And of course, the girl threw me off her front porch, and so forth.
But you had to show her you're a paratrooper now, by God.
I had, I was wanted to show her my shiny boots and my jump wings, and I did, and I ended up going downtown Savannah, getting drunk with a couple of Marines right out of boot camp. and again, another stupid move. You do a lot of crazy, stupid things when you're a young private. Let me tell you.
I've definitely heard some of those wild, even not a private, even some of the old the old salty sergeants getting out of hand.
Oh, well, believe me.
oh yeah, absolutely. So when you finally get out of trouble, so to speak, how long did you say you're not there with the 82nd long, very long, and you're immediately over to the herd, the 173rd Airborne?
No. The way that worked was that I was a 1-1 Bravo, and I was carrying a BAR, and I got promoted to PFC, and I got called down by my platoon sergeant, told me the first sergeant wanted to see me. I went down and reported to first sergeant. Back in those days, when the first sergeant wanted to see you, you knew,
you get down there quick.
I obviously screwed up, and I went down there, and he told me, he says, I need a company clerk, and I see by your records that you work for 3M Company for 29 months, and you can type 60 words a minute. And I need a company clerk now because the old guy is getting ready to process out. So I said, I said, here's another famous thing you say when you're a young private, if you will. I said, well, first sergeant, I didn't join the Army to sit behind a desk. Okay. And he said, Grim, if you stay in your Army long enough, you're going to sit behind a desk.
So, that's inevitable. If anything in the Army is inevitable, if you stay in long enough, you're going to be behind a desk.
Exactly. So anyway, I said, can I have 24 hours to think about it? Well, he said, okay. He said, just remember, no KP, no guard duty, no nothing like that, but you'll work long hours. So, geez, by the time I got back up to the 2nd platoon, every guy in a platoon, was calling me all sorts of weird names that we had at the time for company clerks. And but the platoon leader, Mike Breslin, West Point graduate, I'll never forget it. He came down the hallway, and I braced at attention against a wall, and he said, at ease, and he put his hand up, leaning on a wall, and he got nose to nose with me, and he said, Grimshaw, he said, you go down there and take that job. He said, because, and you go down there and make the 2nd platoon proud. He said, because he says, the company needs you. And if we ever go into combat and jump in to, make parachute jump, lots of times the officers get killed and guys like you survive, and you'll know everything about the company, and you'll have to take over and command the company. And I was like, well, I never thought of it that way, So anyway, I was pretty sure I was going to take the job, which I did. And as a result, I was there. That was like in May of 62.
Oh.
And by March of 63, I was a Sergeant E5 on my way to OCS.
Woo.
Yeah. And first sergeant took care of me. We had an IG inspection. We passed it. And then one day he called me in. He said, company commander wants to see you. And I thought it kind of strange because as a company clerk, I used to have access to company commander all the time. So I went in, and on the company commander's desk was this 2 sets of papers, one for OCS, one for the West Point Prep School.
Oh.
And first sergeant, company commander said, you're going to sign one of them. Which one do you want? and I said, well, I was a failure at advanced mathematics, and I took the business course in high school and said, and anyway, so I ended up going to OCS, and of course of course the kicker there was that now I had to start out with no college education, and it took me nine years in the Army to get 2 years of college, and then the Army finally sent me to college and finished my 2 years. But what happened was that went to the 82nd back again, the same first sergeant. I had 3 days off from OCS to Ranger School, and I went back to Fort Bragg and visited my old first sergeant because I wanted to show him that I had now become a second lieutenant. And anyway, so I went back to see him, and he said, "Where are you going to?" And I said, "Well, they got me on orders to the 5th Mechanized Infantry Division." He said, "Well, we can't have that." And he got on the phone. He says, "Remember Colonel Sadler? Colonel Sadler, the guy that commanded SOG later on.
Oh, yeah.
Sadler had been our deputy battle group commander. Now he was chief of infantry branch. So he got on the phone. He called. He says, "This is First Sergeant Kearns. I want to speak to Colonel Sadler." They put him right through. If I'd have called as a second lieutenant, I probably would have been sitting on the line for about 2 hours, And he said, "Sir," he says, remember Spec Fort Grimshaw, the guy that you signed the OCS paperwork for? Well, he's now Lieutenant Grimshaw, and he needs to come back to the 82nd. I got back to Ranger School, and my orders were dated that afternoon. So the power of the NCOs, the power of the senior NCOs, especially, I never forgot that. And so I went to the 82nd, and then eventually I went to Special Forces, and then I went to 5th Group first. That was my first tour. I didn't get to the 173rd until my second tour in Vietnam.
Okay, wow. So your first tour was Special Forces tour then?
Right. I was the XO initially at Boot Up, as we briefly mentioned. I was there for about 7 months, and then I went to we started the MACV Recondo School, and there's a lot of stories of how all that came about. But yeah, I was at Boot Up, and that was the operation. One of the operations where I got the bronze star for being got wounded slightly, very slightly. But it was an eye-opening tour. Working with indigenous soldiers, working with the Vietnamese special forces. Some of these people weren't always the most reliable and trustworthy people in the world. And yeah, there's Boot Up right there. I call it the outpost to oblivion, and because it was up there along the Cambodian border, and it was a crap hole. Quite the living conditions were horrible. I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and we got $66 a month per diem. We bought our rations down in the commissary in Saigon or locally because we got the per diem. We weren't authorized to get C rations from the American supply. Well, what I did is I didn't like that setup at all. So I had one NCO, Sergeant Middle, and he retired as a command sergeant major, I believe. But he was a Czechoslovakian displaced person in World War II as a young kid, and he joined the American Army because he liked to eat, and he wasn't your poster boy special forces guy. And I said to him, I said, "I tell you what, you're a good scrounger, so why don't you stay in Ben Hoa, Saigon, and scrounge us up really good rations?" So we sent all the crossbows and the captured weapons that we could down there with Frank. And I said, "You only have to walk one patrol a month, and just come back to camp every now and then and let us know you're alive." So he was great scrounger. We got a lot of extra rations that way. We didn't have to pay any money for food after that. And my captain kind of looked at me crazily, and I said, "We should sit around and have a team meeting every month." And he'd say, "XO, how much? What's the pro rata share for our food?" And I would say, "Well, the bar bill is so and so," and of course, everybody had to pay that. But I would say, "No money, no money for food." And he said, "I can't believe that." And I said, "Well," I said, "we did this, we do that." And he said, "Well," he said, "just don't tell me about it." So we had a pretty good thing going there with Sergeant Bedell. He was great, but we had bad relationships. We had and found out later on. This was after I left the camp, that the chief interpreter, our chief interpreter, one of the most trusted guys in camp, turned out to be a double agent. That's how we knew our operation. After that, we knew our operations were being compromised, but we didn't know how. We didn't know who was doing it. During the time that I was there, our intel sergeant, quite frankly, the first guy, I won't mention any names, but he didn't have an intel net set up. He didn't have this. But here was a problem with boot up. Boot up got almost overrun in 1965. When I got there in March of '66, Fifth Group hadn't decided whether they were really going to keep this camp. Okay, so we weren't getting the supplies or the cement and things that needed to reconstruct the camp. So there were a lot of logistical issues there, and then of course the LLDB, they were limited to what they could do. We had a young LLDB lieutenant who became a captain. He was nice to work with when he was a lieutenant, but when he became a Daiwi and running the camp, then all of a sudden he became sort of a tyrant in his own way. But a likable tyrant, if you will. But we had a lot of issues there, and it was not boot up was, there was some nice moments, but it wasn't the most pleasurable experience I ever had in the Army. I can tell you, going from boot up and then going to the Trang, to the MACV Recondo School, and living in Project Delta, my God, I went from hell and I went to heaven in a couple of helicopter rides. It was interesting, but and then building the MACV Recondo School, that was a big challenge. We had all the money that we needed. There was no problems there. It was a matter of hiring contractors, vetting the contractors, getting the project bids, doing this, doing that. And fortunately, I had a good NCO named Sergeant Hawk. And Sergeant Hawk, he knew how to go down to the port in the Trang, and he would come back with these brand new vehicles. and he would say, "Look outside, sir." And I'd look out the office, and there's this brand new Jeep, and he'd have a CIDG guy out there painting the markings on the bumper. And I would say, "Where'd you get that?" He goes, "Complete with logbook, sir. Don't ask, don't tell." Okay. How much money do you need? Well, I need a little money to buy some steaks, some beer, and some booze. Okay, you got it.
What a guy, a scrounger at best. That I love a good SF scrounger.
Oh, absolutely. That's what made it both boot up and MACV Recondo School especially. But we had good, we had good NCOs there at the MACV Recondo School. You had guys that had run recon, had been in all the special projects and been to SOG, and they needed a change and so forth. And these guys came in. They knew what they were doing. In very short order, they put together a very good 3-week program, which is exactly what General Westmoreland wanted. And I give a lot of credit to these guys and the officers. And A.J. Bo Baker was the assistant commandant. He was the guy that ran the school on a daily basis. Colonel Kelly was the overall commandant on paper. And then Lieutenant Colonel Ed Rybat came in while I was there, and he was the assistant commandant for the rest of the time that I was there. But I had great the thing about it is I had great NCOs, and a quick, yeah, there's Ed Rybat there. You know, Ed Rybat had 52-inch chest and 19-inch arms. He was a big bodybuilder. You know,
I mean, he looks like special forces guys today. I mean, he looks like he's built like a brick, you know what house.
Oh yeah. Well, and Ed was a bodybuilder, and when we started building the compound, he said to me one day, he said, I want you to make sure that you put a cement pad in there where we can have my weights.
Wow. Still pumping iron.
Yeah. So I'm like, I said, sir, you know, this is, you know, we're supposed to be building a compound, not your weight thing. But we did it. And then one day he came to me and says, you know, we need to have our own well and our own water tank. And Jesus, I didn't know much Army supply systems, and so I was having trouble with it. And he was chewing my butt every day or two for a while there. And so I got the well done, and we got that. And finally, again, Sergeant Major Julian Hallimal, who knew Rybat very well, served with him in the first group, came to me and said he heard me get my butt chewed one day by Rybat, and he came to me and says, he was a Hawaiian guy, you know, hey brother, you know, and he would say, yeah, he said, don't worry, we'll take care of the water tank. And what the NCOs did, they spotted a 60,000 gallon water tank on the other side of the Trang Air Base, and they organized a midnight raid with a lowboy, a crane from the Civilian Construction Company, and they dressed up in civilian clothes, wearing Civilian Construction Company hard hats, and they went there and with the crane and just lifted it up, put it on a lowboy, and drove away. And as they were driving away, the Air Force security police came up to them and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" It was like 2:00 in the morning, you know. and it's, oh well, we got to move this thing over to MACV Recondo. They told them the truth, and oh well, we'll escort you over there. So the security police escorted them over. The crane took the we had a big sign over the main gate, took the sign off, and then we're able to get the tank through. Then they put these big cargo parachutes over it, and I didn't know this was happening. I woke up in the morning, I looked out the window, the BOQ, and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see the sky because there was this monster water tank there. And I opened the door and I was, what the hell's going on here? And Sergeant Hawk and Sergeant Major Hallimal, sir, you don't want to know. I said, yeah, I do want to know on this one. Even though I thought I was going to go to jail over it, you know. And they told me the story, and of course, it probably took me an hour to stop laughing over it all.
I can imagine waking up to seeing that monstrosity that you had been hoping for finally just show up out of nowhere. I can only imagine.
Yeah, well, we already had the platform, you know, and everything built for it, the tower built for it. So all they had to do is they just put it on top of the tower. Of course, they had to hook it up and so forth. But yeah, and then within a couple of days, they had that water tank completely camouflage paint of tiger stripe design with the MACV Recondo School as the logo on it, you know. So now it was ours, you know. Nobody ever asked.
That is outstanding. And and since we're on the subject, we'll be going back and forth, guys, but there is a wonderful, and there are some of the photos, not all of the photos, but Tom Hallowell of Radix Press, he's done the Who's Who from SOG, White Star, Faint, Project Sigma, who's who of 5th Group, 7th Group, 46th Group, our company in Thailand. But he put out a special history of the MACV Recondo School from 66 till its closing in 71. And it features the curriculum, some amazing photos. So I recommend y'all get that if y'all are wanting to look for some MACV Recondo stuff. But before we get further into the Recondo thing, because that's going to be a large part, because I've already gotten a lot of questions about that. At Budop, when you got there and all of that with I forgot, is it A341?
A341, yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay. Were you there? I believed you had mentioned them being, or the potential of being overrun, but I remember some instance where the 25th ID was tasked to the camp because they thought the VC was going to completely overrun the camp. Were you there when the camp was ever in danger of being overrun, or when it was probed heavily?
No. It was an in-between time. The 25th ID came in, I think, well after I had left. But that was one of my recommendations to Colonel Kelly when he came for his very first visit in August of '66. What I said was, I told Colonel Kelly, he asked, well, I'll put it this way. Our captain, God rest his soul, because he and I became friends later on. And he turned out to be a really good guy, but he was sort of put too much stress on himself. He wanted to get promoted to major, and it was, there was a lot of stuff going on with this guy. And anyway, he wanted to put on a Pentagon style briefing for Kelly, and the team sergeant and I, Bill Kindle and I, we begged and pleaded with him, just be straightforward, because the camp was not producing a lot in body count and enemy body count and things of that nature at the time. And our operations, we knew, like I said before, were in many cases being compromised. Either we go out on patrol, we didn't see anything, or we go out and make some light contact, or go out on patrol. I made contact one day, and Ed Staff Sergeant Ed Carnett and I were the Americans on a patrol, and we were firing and maneuvering, and we realized that he and I were the only two guys firing and maneuvering against these people. The CIDG were laying well behind us, and that was one of the things when Colonel Kelly came to the camp, and I said several things. I said, I think that the CIDG need to be completely retrained. They don't understand infantry tactics, even though a lot of their fighters have been fighting wars for a long time and knew the area and so forth. And there were a lot of good people in the CIDG, don't get me wrong, but they didn't conduct patrols the way I think Mother Fort Benning would like to see him do it. There were a lot of issues and didn't understand infantry tactics. Some of our SFNCOs who were good specialists needed to be brushed up on infantry tactics as well. So that was an in-house problem that we were trying to correct. But when Colonel Kelly came to visit the camp, my poor captain, he wanted to give him this big briefing, and Kelly kept cutting him off and saying, just tell me the facts, and they finally cut the captain off, and he turned to me and he said, Lieutenant Grimshaw, you've been in this camp for almost 7 months, 6 months at the time. And he said, what's going on here? And boy, I was standing there at the other end of the team house, and I knew that question was probably going to come up at some point. In fact, the team sergeant and I had discussed it, and we had our bags packed. We thought we were probably going to be gone. And well, I looked down at that cement floor of the team house. I was looking for a hole to get into, because I knew what I was going to say. So I told Colonel Kelly the truth. And then after that, he said to me, "Take me around the camp." I said, "Yes, sir." And my captain said, "I'll be glad to." And he told the captain, he goes, "No, Lieutenant Grimshaw is going to take me around the camp." So I walked Colonel Kelly and the entourage with General Kwan and the LLDB staff and my B team staff commander and my C team commander, who was the acting commander, who turned up to be later on was General Lutz, but he was a major at the time, and a whole bunch of people. And so I led Colonel Kelly around the camp. I told him I had some of my NCOs with me, and we told him the facts. We told him some funny stories. We told him some sad stories. I went through all the major problems with him. I gave him the unvarnished truth. As a result, as Colonel Kelly was leaving, and he had me ride in the Jeep with him down to the airstrip. He wouldn't let my captain ride in the Jeep with him. That's how bad it got. And I rode with him and I talked with him. And as he got out of the Jeep and started to get on his helicopter, he looked at me and he said, "Grimshaw," he said, "you're on a promotion list to captain, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well," he said, "when you make captain, you're coming to Nha Trang to work for me."
Oh, wow.
I said, "Yes, sir." And he looked around and he said, "Be careful." And I knew what he meant. And so with that, he hopped on a helicopter. And, I thought, well, okay, and I didn't know what the assignment was going to be. And even when I went to the track, I did not know what I was going to do. And I ended up working for going to MACV Recondo School. Well, the little catch to this was that Major A.J. Baker had been in the 6th group. There's Colonel Kelly. Bo Baker had been in the 6th group. I knew him. He was one of my mentors. And I had visited him in Saigon not long before Colonel Kelly came into camp. And he said, I went to him and I said, I want to go to Project Delta. Can you get me in Project Delta? He said, "I promised your wife that I was going to bring all you young studs back home alive, And he did. He got up. He did that at Fort Bragg before he left in '65. But anyway, so he says that to me. He says, "Now I got something going here I can't tell you about, but you'll be hearing from me." I went like, "Okay." And he says, and Colonel Kelly's already told me, Colonel Kelly and I have already talked about what you've done at Boot Up, yada, yada. So, okay. So I went back to camp and, sure enough, I got the word and I went to Nha Trang, and I hadn't thought much more of that conversation with Baker, but I ended up working for Bo. He was only there another 2 weeks or so before Rybat came in and took over. But that's how I got to MACV Recondo School. And I think the fact that I was a Ranger qualified guy, I think that was part of it, if you will. But one of the cool things about before I left MACV Recondo School, I got a call. Colonel Kelly wants to see you. So I went up to 5th Group headquarters, and Colonel Kelly, as I was about, I walked in there and I didn't know what he wanted. So I walked in, reported to him, and he goes, "Grimshaw, you're going home next week, right?" I said, and I was beaming proudly, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Wrong." I said, "Sir." And he said, "Well," he says, your next big boss, Colonel Boppy Edwards, who was the head of the Ranger Department at Fort Benning, is coming over here for a visit to see, quote unquote, how Rangers are faring in Vietnam. And he's sent over here by the Infantry School Commander, General York. And he said, and we're hosting him, and you're going to be his escort officer. So we had our own Huey, our own crew, and Bob Moberg was a pilot. God rest his soul. And we had on that it was Major Larry Aker, who was the commander of the Mountain Ranger camp at the time, Colonel Boppy Edwards, and then the guy who was at in CINCPAC Special Operations, which is ultimately the same job that I held several years later. And anyway, we spent 8 days going around all 4 corps of Vietnam, going to places where Rangers were, Vietnamese Rangers, the American advisors. We went to the Vietnamese Ranger training facility. And so we went all 4 corps, different types of ceremonies and this and that. I learned a lot from that 8 days. We based out of Saigon primarily and the Trang. So that was kind of good. And we even went at that was the last week in February of 1967. That was a week after the 173rd made their combat jump on Operation Junction City. And we went to visit the 173rd commander, Colonel Jack Dean at the time. And we actually landed right at the edge of the LZ or the DZ. And the general had a general's mess set up there and so forth. So we got a briefing there and so forth. But 8 days around Vietnam before I went home. And because I was going to the Ranger Department, I went to Florida Ranger Camp. And so I had a great time with Colonel Edwards. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about senior officer relationships and politics and et cetera. But it was a fantastic time, and I've still got photos and color slides of that trip, mainly color slides. And one of these days, I'm going to find somebody who's going to be able to put them into print for me. So anyway, and so my MACV Recondo School tour, it was a different type of assignment because it wasn't direct combat. For me, I was a staff officer. And my instructor number is number 25. That's because I was the 25th guy to come through the door to be on the cadre. I don't want to, misrepresent anything here. I was not an instructor per se, but I built that camp. That was my job. I was the funds officer, and I had some great times doing it. And I had some nuts. Yeah, that's the picture of me. And what you don't see in that picture, which I've cropped there, that's if you look down at the hand on my arm, that's Rybat's hand.
Okay.
The original photo was a picture of Rybat and myself. And the history of that photo is this. Rybat came walking to my office one day, and he saw me. You go back to that photo of getting that. That's it right there. And he saw this brown package sitting on my desk, and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, those are my awards, sir." He said, "What do you got in there?" I said, "Well, I got a Bronze Star for Valor and a Purple Heart." He said, and he said, "You ever have a ceremony?" I said, "Well, no, sir. I was a boot up. They just came in the mail, and here you are." And and he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, no ceremony." He goes, "Well, we're gonna have a ceremony." And so, and he told George Heckman, Captain Heckman, to arrange for a photographer. And the next day, we had a photographer in there, and that photo is the result of all that. And and a quick history about Rybat, real fast. When I worked for Rybat, we had some issues between us, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but there was always this. We sort of rubbed each other the wrong way, if you will, and Sergeant Major Hallamel came to me one day and he said, you gotta understand the history of Rybat and this and that, what happened to him, and so it made me better understand Rybat. But we had some issues, and then later on in Thailand, when I was in JCRC, when they got booted out of Cambodia, here comes Lieutenant Colonel Rybat, and he was there for a while, and we talked, we socialized a little bit, and then when he went to Fort Bragg, and we're at Fort Bragg, we're Stillwell Lounge one night, and drinking beer, and the folks left, and this was like in 1976, and we're sitting there one night. It was just me and him, and he looked at me, and he said, of course, we were, I would say we had several beers. I'll leave it at that. and he said, Jim, he says, I've always gotten the feeling that you don't like me. I said, yes, sir, I don't like you. And I said, you gave me what I consider to be a less than sterling efficiency report based on the fact of what occurred at the MACV Recondo School. And I said, I resent that, and so he said, he looked at me and he says, do you know, now you got to remember, he's got a 52-inch chest and 19-inch arms, okay? And he says to me, he says, you realize if I hit you, that I could send you flying across this room? I said, I looked at him and I said, and by this time I threw away the rank, and I said, at that point, I said, yes, sir. I said, yeah. I said, if you hit me, I'd probably go sliding across that dance floor and crashing in that jukebox. I said, and I'd end up in Womack Army Hospital. And I said, but here's the catch, Ed. When I get out of the hospital, I'm going to kill you. And he looked at me and he said, he stuck out his hand. He said, why don't we just be friends? Because I figured he's going to hit me, And I quickly thought, I said, why don't we just let bygones be bygones here? So we shook hands, and we were friends ever since then. We never had an issue between us. But I liked Ed. Overall, it took me a while, but yeah, because he did. I don't think that he got enough credit for being the assistant commandant of MACV Recondo School. I give him a lot of credit for some of the things that he wanted that we got done. Some of his resistance was part of our issues and so forth. But yeah, so I'm so we didn't get along very well at the time. But in any case, we ended up being friends, and I never forget that. And the tag to the story is this: I left Fort Bragg briefly, and then I got orders to go to the. He was in Special Warfare Center as over on the instructor side of the house. And I left Fort Bragg, and after being the group operations officer, and that's another story into itself. But I got orders to Hawaii to special ops, and I went to went by Fort Bragg and had lunch at the officers club, and I ran into Ed, and Ed says, what are you doing? By that time, I had like a 2-week growth of beard and so forth. And Ed says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm on my way to Hawaii. I got this really neat job in special ops in Hawaii. working for Colonel Andre. And he stopped suddenly. He looked at me and he said, "That's the job I wanted. I got turned down." And I said, "I don't know what to tell you, Ed, but I got picked for the job." And I left there and I went like, okay, And I was a little embarrassed by it, but at the same time, I was like, well, that was Colonel Andre's call, not mine. What can I say? But last time I heard about Ed, he retired. He went to Houston, Texas, and became a gigantic real estate guy. And I understand he's passed away. I'm not. I think I've been told that several times. But I don't think he got enough. He got promoted out of it and all that good stuff. And I think he got a Silver Star because he took in a rescue team that went in. I think that's part of the history. It's in that book, the MACV Recondo School. So anyway, he got. But in the end, Ed and I patched up our differences, and I'm glad we did.
And to be honest, I'm glad he gave you a ceremony and did a picture, because I'm going to read real quick. I know you're not going to like me doing this, but just to let y'all know how he earned that. As a Special Forces advisor in Vietnam on May 22nd, 1966, Ranger Grimshaw neutralized a 12.7 millimeter heavy machine gun that had pinned down his CIDG men. His actions inspired the CIDG to overrun the large enemy force. Despite being wounded by enemy hand grenades, he continued to lead the attack from the front. For his valorous actions, he was awarded a Bronze Star with a V device for valor and the Purple Heart from his injuries from grenades. Ranger Grimshaw was selected. Well, that's going into Recondo School, but that's why he had those medals for that ceremony. That's what he did, leading from the front with his men. That's one of my favorite stories that I've heard. As we're transitioning here, you had mentioned, and we've always heard stories, like you said, some of the CIDG were good guys, some of the LLDB guys were good guys, but I remember, and I've heard from numerous guys having issues on camp, but y'all had an issue with a camp, and names won't be brought up or anything, but y'all's LLDB captain, that y'all's counterparts was a known rapist and actually attempted to kill one of the CIDGs, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we had a situation where when I would pull guard duty, I went around. I would check the inner wall, and I learned to take money out of the op fund and pay 2 bodyguards, CIDG, to go with me at night.
Ooh.
I learned that was a must.
Oh.
I heard some rustling going on in along the wall there, one of these little hooches, and I pulled the curtain back. I looked in, and I saw the LLDB Sergeant Major jumped up, and he's zipping up his pants, and there was a CIDG wife laying there. Obviously, he was raping her, and I caught him in the act. I put a flashlight on him.
Oh, yeah. You definitely caught him in the act. Uh-oh. Jim? Hang on, guys. We'll wait just a second. Well, wait a minute. I won't mess anything up, but while we're waiting on Jim to get back, I'll bring up some photos, because what we're about to start getting into is we'll have a Walt Shoemate. Guys, this has never before been seen. This is, yeah, he's got lower internet capabilities than I do. This is never before seen of Walt Shoemate, so we've got a good Walt story coming up, but let me Let me see what's going on here with Red. I mean, not Red, with Jim. I'll keep speaking a bit to talk just to get him on. I messaged him to see what's up, but
I'm hearing you now.
Oh, okay. We don't have video of you anymore, but that's okay right now. Well, gosh, we just lost him again. Telling him to rejoin and it should fix everything. Guys, while we're talking about this, because we're about to get into a huge thing not a lot of people know about, this book is by Hani Adderholt, who was the Air Force's version of the Green Berets and all of that. Bad man, in a good way, not mean or anything. But he helped stand up JPRC. A lot of SOG were in there. Charlie Beckwith was in there. Lot of interesting men. So we're gonna get Irish Rebel. Yes, hang on. Let me give you my email. And I'll put it in here. So any of y'all that want to contact me, y'all can. Sorry about this, guys. We've had issues all morning. With his computer. This is one of mine, Irish, and then I'll give you my personal one too, my cell phone one. If I added those weird arrow symbols, don't add the arrow symbols. Just do the in between the arrow symbols. Yeah, it's storming in Georgia bad right now, and I think he's lost his connection because if you noticed, Red, it was glitching up when he was telling stories. But if y'all want, and when we do get him back and get it set up, we'll go deep and dive in. I was just gonna try and encompass everything. Not only, yeah, Red, it's actually getting real bad here right now. Absolutely, Irish. Message me whenever you want to. I'll give you my cell phone number too whenever you email me. But this book right here, guys, it's relatively inexpensive. It's online. You can probably get them on Amazon. But to support the Special Forces men, here's Jim right here. I go to that website right there.
I'm back.
There we are. All right. There we go.
So anyway, real quick, the sergeant major had an issue with me, and just before I left, to make a long story short, he and his henchmen they came out and created an issue in camp when my boss and his boss were out on patrol, and he was the senior LLDB in camp, so he thought he was the commander and he was going to run the camp his way. He came out with his henchmen. He was drunk, and I went out to see what was going on, and I could hear him talking in Vietnamese, and I understood some Vietnamese, and I realized he was saying he was going to kill me. And so he went for his pistol, and I cold cocked him, and then I got my guys, and we walked back to the team house, and we put on all our stuff, figuring we're going to have a real problem. Of course, they get on the radio, and you call the B team, tell them what's going on. But I hit the sergeant major and yelled for his henchmen to take him back into their compound and put him to bed. He was going to kill me. There was no doubt about my military mind. And what bothered me was that we had a brand new C team commander, and I issued a report. And I was on orders to go to Nha Trang anyway. It was actually my last day in camp when the incident occurred, and my replacement was there and so forth. And we almost all got killed in one fell swoop. But
Was he dealt with? Did y'all get him out of there? Or did he just continue on?
He was one of the people I said to Colonel Kelly that needed to go. I said, we got some people on our team that need to change the scenery, and some LLDB that need to go. And the sergeant major was one of them, because I caught the guy. He was doing that to CIDG wives, in other words, to intimidate, and so forth, and get his way. And I was told by my bodyguards that the sergeant major did this all the time. And so we call it rape in our culture. Let's put it that way. And yeah, so it who knows? The women felt they had to do it. They keep their husband in the CIDG or whatever.
I'm sure implicit threats were given that if you don't shut up, then your husband's gone, your money. I'm sure
your pay is gone, all kinds of stuff. And anyway,
just pathetic.
He was one of the guys that I mentioned to Colonel Kelly. But here's the thing: the night before, the day before Colonel Kelly was coming to visit our camp for the very first time in August of '66, we got a message from 5th Group headquarters that said they're reducing the amount of rice per man per day, and how many grams of rice, whatever it was. And you see, and the LLDB commander, he was furious over it, because the LLDB didn't have the same kind of supply system that we did. And so they had to graft their rice off of what we gave the CIDG. We knew that. So it was not an issue with us. But now with this rice reduction, that meant a reduction overall for them. And that infuriated them. And there was nothing we could do to change it. And so the LLDB commander, he was furious. I mean, he screamed at us in English and Vietnamese, and he said to CIDG, no fight. So he had the CIDG lay down their arms. And the night before Kelly came to visit the camp, we didn't have anybody on guard duty. No CIDG was pulling guard or anything. Okay. And that was a long night for us. And we thought that the LLDB might even revolt and get the one of the CIDG companies or two of them to start firing on us, because they were throwing grenades at the team house. They were throwing rocks on top of the tin roof, and every now and then you hear a grenade go off in a compound. And quite frankly, my captain, God bless him, he wasn't handling it right, and Team Sergeant and I had to kind of calm him down and get him straightened out. And I'm not trying to say that it was all about me, but the team leader and I had some leadership difficulties, if you will, and he didn't want to see. He was trying to get promoted to major, and he didn't. In addition to having this big briefing plan for the next day, he didn't want to notify the B team that we were having this problem. And I kept saying to him, I said, you don't know if they're going to attack us or not. You got to we got to have some helicopters or something on standby, or get the jets up here from Benoit. I said, you don't know. And then while we're in this situation, something was a piece of cardboard in broken English was slid under the side door of the team house, right? Also, we looked down there, and here's this, and they had the Cambodian company, the Commercial company, they had a guy come over with a piece of cardboard and said, and it didn't say if, it said, when fighting start, okay, when fighting start, come this way, meaning go out to the west wall through the Cambodian company, and then the Cambodian company was going to take us and E&E out of camp. And that's what they were saying to us. So because, and, you know, it was like, it wasn't if the fighting started, it was when. So bad English or good English, it's still when fighting start. Well, my captain freaked out. Okay. So we're like, we got helmets on and flak jackets, and we're locked and loaded, and we're this and that. And finally I convinced him, you got to call the B team. Well, I can't call the B team commander. Colonel Kelly's coming tomorrow. I said, no kidding. We won't be alive tomorrow when Colonel Kelly gets here. So anyway, we went back and forth over that one. And fortunately, nothing happened. And then Kelly arrived the next day. We got a notice that said, when Colonel Kelly arrives, have the CIDG out there in a formation. So we got the LLDB to have them do that. And General Kwan and Colonel Kelly came out there and addressed the troops. And Kelly promised the troops that put the rice ration back to where it was, give them a little bonus, and said we'll give them some extra money in their pay. And so I call it the Rice Rebellion of Budap. It's I don't know if it's written up anywhere in the history of Budap, but it did occur. And so that's how all that came about the next day, with the captain just fumbling over his briefing and trying to smooth the edges, and it just wasn't, it just wasn't working for the guy. And but that's how I got to MACV Recondo School. Budap was, and I've talked to guys that served at Budap afterwards. Yeah, there's a picture of us on the 4th of July at Budap, 1966. Yeah, that's me right there in front. Sam Allen, who's in the middle there, he came back in the second tour and got killed. He was a medic. And Lynn Steele, he ended up going to OCS. He retired as a lieutenant colonel out of reserves, and lives down in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He's a very good friend of mine. We're in contact all the time. We've had a great friendship over the years. But what we did there, we weren't allowed to fly the flag, the U.S. flag in the Vietnamese camp. So on 4th of July, we put that up there, and the jets that were on call to come, they flew up from Budap, and we were out there waving at the jets as they went by and waving the flag to celebrate the 4th of July. That's how that photo came about. And I can't recall who took the photo, because they probably went up in the observation tower and took it, and maybe Lynn can remember. I don't know, but there it is.
That's that's one of my favorite photos of all of yours. You've got a lot of good ones, but that 4th of July photo is amazing. Y'all watching the jets come through.
Yeah, that was great. And then see, later on, we had this little program when we invited the pilots. They sent 2 of the pilots up by helicopter, and they came up and they spent like an overnight with us, and we took them on a little patrol into the rubber plantation, just to let them go out there and get sweaty a little bit, show them what it's like to walk on the ground, and be a grunt for the day program, or whatever you want to call it. And then we went down the edge of the airstrip. We let them fire their M16s, because those guys come over there. They probably, in most cases, never, if they're issued a weapon, they probably never even fired it, and anyway, so they had fun. We drank a bunch of beer, and we sent them back to Benoit. But the thing is, face-to-face contact. You know who you're supporting. You know who you're fighting with and who you're fighting for. That kind of thing. So it was I don't know who started that program. I think probably give credit to at that time, the 4th of July. Yeah, that was Captain Stanage was gone by that time, and so I don't know who came up with it. I probably a team sergeant, for all I know. I had 2 good team sergeants. Harry Golden, who was there, he was sent there to straighten out the American NCOs in that team. He left, and then Bill Kendall came in, and Kendall, we all, anytime a team sergeant leaves, just like a commander, you wonder if you're going to get a good guy in there, knows what he's doing. And Bill Kendall came in there and proved right away that we were going to have a great team sergeant. And Harry Golden was Harry was he was a character, and he and I got along very well. The interesting part with Harry, he never called me sir. Okay, he'd always say lieutenant. Okay, and I used to wonder, and then of course as I got to know him, I realized that he had a son in college in ROTC who became an officer, and and later on when I was in the Florida Ranger camp as instructor, he came through Ranger School and he graduated from Ranger School, and we had a party there. Beckley used to have a party for these guys right there in Florida, and I got to have a few beers with him. He went off to the 9th Division as a second lieutenant platoon leader and got killed. And but Harry as a team sergeant was one of my mentors, if you will. He taught me the accounting program. He taught me how to do the books. He taught me how to do a lot of things. He taught me how to handle the team leaders and so forth. And
if I'm thinking correctly, Mr. Bill Kendall ended up in SOG, if I'm not mistaken, later on, if it's the same Bill Kendall.
Yeah, I think he did. And he's passed away too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. He was one of the early pontoon men, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. But Bill, but when I left the camp at Boot Up, the captain in question was replaced. He wasn't relieved. He was replaced. And Bill came up to the Trang and told me he was leaving the camp. I saw him. He came up to visit me. And but the captain got replaced. And the thing is, he became an RFPF advisor, which was not exactly a career enhancing job for a captain. And then when Captain Dick Potter at Suidaw got wounded and had to be medevaced, they had to put somebody in there. Well, this guy was a senior captain with a lot of time and grade. And so having been at Boot Up, had the experience there, not necessarily a sterling one, but they put him in there, and he took over that team and he did a good job. And because I got to talk to him a few years later about it. And I know he did it. I've talked to other people. He came in there. He used, to his credit, he used his experience at Boot Up. He realized some of the things that he needed to change, and so he took that with him to Suidaw. And from what I understand, he did a pretty good job. So, so that. But when he first came in, I got to tell you his quick story. When he first came in, the day he came in with Chaplain Keenitz to visit, and I knew Keenitz from the 6th Special Forces Group, and anyway, the captain came into camp. The two of them came in, and the captain showed up. Stanage had already gone, and so we had who was available. And we briefed the new team leader. We had and Golden was the team sergeant, and so we had the Vietnamese cook go home early so we could talk to the captain, and because we didn't want to. She had some prying ears at times, and she left. And of course, we had a few beers and this and that. And Harry was about almost 60 days away from going home, and he had been promised to make E8, and he was still in E7. He was a little upset by that, and so there was an issue there. So all of a sudden, Harry was hitting the sauce a little bit that night, and a little bit too much. He was drinking his favorite vodka drink, I guess. And so I showed the new team leader the bunker where he was going to sleep. And he said to me, he says, "Well, don't you sleep in here?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "You and I never sleep in the same space, and you and I never go on patrol together, you know. And so I'm standing there talking to him in candlelight darkness, if you will, in private. And he says to me, he said, tomorrow morning, I want you to get a helicopter in here. And I said, why? And he said, well, I'm relieving the team sergeant of his duties. And I said, well, why? He said, well, he's drunk on site, and that's against fifth group policy. I said, well, here at Boot Up, we have our own definition of drunkenness. Okay. And I said, and I think every team has their own definition. I said, and I explained Harry's history about not making E8. And I said, that's something as a new team leader that maybe you could look into right away and probably get, that's how you get the team sergeant on your side, quite frankly. And anyway, he was out of it. And he said, no, he says, you bring a helicopter in here tomorrow. I'm relieving you, team sergeant. I don't want him around. And I said, sir, you realize that the team sergeant's got some pretty good connections. And I said, it's going to be a real problem. It's going to be a real challenge for you. And the conversation got a little heated after that. So finally, I said to him, sir, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bring 2 helicopters in here. He said, 2? I said, yes, sir. I said, 1 for Harry Golden and half the team, and the second one for me and the other half the team. And we'll leave you here as the only American in camp. And I said, and by sundown, you'll be dead. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'll instruct one of my bodyguards to take care of you. And as I said it, I said, this sounds like a B movie, you know? I mean, this is right out of Hollywood. This is probably a script that I've heard before. And why am I saying these words to my new boss? But it wasn't. And he said, you know, well, that's mutiny, Lieutenant. I said, call it whatever you want to call it, sir. I said, but if you insist on bringing that helicopter in here, I said, I'm bringing 2. I said, don't you realize that Golden has, I said, you know, Colonel Roy and the Sergeant Major are the guys that brought Golden in here. You know, I said, they know each other from the 10th group. They know, you know, I mean, there's a lot of history here. And I said, and whose word are they going to take? Yours, the brand new guy on the ground, or Golden's, or me, who's been here a while? And he got all flabbergasted, and finally he backed off. And I said, excuse me, sir, I'm going back to team house, get another drink, like that. And so I Golden had gone to bed. I had to pull guard duty that night, so I was trying to get out of there. And so the next morning over coffee, before the captain woke up, I grabbed Harry, and I said, Harry, I said, let me tell you what happened between the new captain and me last night. And I said, you got to watch what you're doing here. I said, you know, your time is coming to an end. We got to do a better job of finding out why you're not an E8, you know, and so forth. I said, and I promise you, I'll do that. I said, but you got to treat this new captain with kid gloves, you know. And he did, and Harry went home okay, and Harry made E8. We got, you know, he got word a few weeks later he made E8, and that kind of smoothed it over. But he, you know, and the new team leader said to Harry one day, said, Team Sergeant, how about you and I go on a patrol? and Harry, always wanted to throw gas on the flames, said, sir, I only go on patrol with the lieutenant. Nobody else. And I'm sitting there going, I'm looking at Harry going like, that's not the right thing to say here, Harry. You know?
Oh, that's great.
But, you know, the thing about an A camp, it is one of the greatest sociological experiences known to mankind. You take 12 guys, if you're lucky to get 12, you put them in some outpost that's a crap hole, okay, and you give them this mission to especially during the body count days, when body count was the measure of success, the war of attrition, Westmoreland's war of attrition. And by God, if you weren't producing it, I'm the same way in American units. If you weren't producing body count, by God, you weren't winning the war. I found out later on as a company commander, we had a report in every hour, and I said, and you had to be moving. And it was, well, you haven't moved in an hour. Well, no kidding. Maybe we're taking a break, maybe we're doing field sanitation. Well, you got to move. You got to report in every hour. I said, I didn't realize that winning the war rested on me reporting in every hour, So anyway, those.
I mean, how different from all of this going on in Recondo and all of that was your difference with the 173rd? How drastically different, and how were you in the relatively same area, or I Corps, 2 Corps? What?
Well, boot up was in Phuc Long Province in 3rd Corps. Okay,
3 Corps.
Up along the Cambodian border. We were about 6 clicks to the north and 6 to 8 clicks to the west was the Cambodian border. It wasn't very far. We were literally out there, right? It was a long way to Saigon, let me tell you. And the difference was the 173rd was, when I got there, they were at LZ English in 2 Corps at Bong Song. All right. And then the difference is that you're now commanding infantry soldiers, and these guys in my particular airborne infantry company, most of my guys I found out were draftees. Okay.
Oh,
wow. They got drafted into the Army. They went through infantry training, and some like the one guy told me, he says, well, the airborne recruiter came in and said, if you go to jump school, that's at least 3 more weeks in the United States before you go to Vietnam.
Me, I'm going.
Yeah, I'm going to jump school. And I didn't blame them, but I had a lot of draftees, and of course they were 18, 19 years old. Big difference than having 30-year-old sergeants and 28-year-old sergeants and specialists in their field, really experienced guys. Big difference. And then of course the mission was different, and at first we were in a search and destroy, and we were out, when we go to the field in the American unit. Also the fact that we always were under the fan of 105 artillery. Everywhere we went, we had artillery, and we had almost immediate gunship backup helicopter gunship backup if we needed it, and airstrikes. There in boot up, we didn't, we didn't have that kind of support, and we'd be lucky to get the mortar crew out there and so forth. A lot of differences between how you operate and how you lead. With the infantry company, there's me. I'm the captain. I'm the old man. I was 27 years old at the time. I was the old man, and the guys. And the thing was, when I took over my infantry company, what ran through my mind, besides worrying about getting killed, that's General Barnes there in the front, and then that's Lieutenant Colonel Jack Nicholson. His son later on was 4-star commander in Afghanistan, but that's the Jack Nicholson there. When he was battalion commander at the time.
What?
2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry. there was a lot more control by, through the American chain of command system, the American way of doing things. A lot of differences. We get a resupply if we're out in the field. We get a helicopter resupply of C rations and LRP rations every 3 days. We'd usually have an A ration hot meal come out in Mermite cans. We had better direct support, if you will.
It's wild seeing you right there with your Recondo patch and your your right shouldered SF tab right there. I imagine when guys saw you walking up, they were like, "Oh my God, look at this guy walking up with the Special Forces tab and the Recondo patch."
Yeah, the thing about it with Nicholson and I, Nicholson was Ranger qualified as well. He and I came in the country about the same time, and he immediately went and took over the battalion. I went to brigade, assistant brigade S3. I was in brigade, S4 shop, not S3, S4 supply. I was in there for about 5 months before I got the company. And I came into the battalion when Nicholson was in his last 2 months of commanding it. Nicholson told me when I first met him, he said, "Well, where'd you come from?" I said, "Well, I just came from Florida Ranger Camp." And he says, "I hate land graders." And I just thought he was kidding. And then the day that I took command of the company, he says, we're going on operation tomorrow. Company commander's meeting tonight. So I went up to the company commander's meeting, and he gives us this op order to we're gonna make a helicopter assault into the An Lao Valley the next day. And he goes, and this is my first day in command of the company. I could hardly find where the orderly room door or the latrine was, and I'm trying to get organized, trying to figure out what's going on, who I have, and how many soldiers I have, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, and he looks around at all the company commanders, and he says, the lane grader, Captain Grimshaw from the Florida Ranger Camp, D Company will lead the battalion in the helicopter assault. I went like, oh, Jesus God, and I went to the field the next day of infantry company that was supposed to have, like about 140 people, round figure, in it. And I went to the field the next day, and I had 84 people in an infantry company. My first platoon was commanded by a first lieutenant who was a Ranger, qualified guy. My second platoon was commanded by a Sergeant E5. And my third platoon was commanded by a Staff Sergeant E6, the platoon sergeant, who fortunately was experienced and had been in Vietnam before. I was out there for 3 days, and we got pinched out by the 22nd ARVN. The way this mission went was all designed. We came back after 3 days. After 3 days of being in the field without having one shot fired in anger at us, I went from 84 guys to 64. And all that was because we're climbing up mountains, and guys are slipping and twisting ankles, or they're stepping into punji stakes, and a thing called jungle rot. And you may have heard of it, but in this jungle rot, when the high bacteria count in any cut that you would get walking through the boonies there, a lot of bacteria goes into that cut right away. And so you get these pustules on your system, on your hands or between your legs, and guys couldn't walk or they couldn't hold their weapon. So you had to medevac them until they could get it squared away. So first 3 days, and then eventually when I got back, and then we got a couple lieutenants, and then we reorganize the company. But yeah, a lot of differences. But the thing is, you're the guy, you're the old man, you're the captain, okay? And most of those people under you do not have the same experience. The thought that ran through my head as I started to say was that, hey, I've been in the Army about 8 or 9 years by that time, and I'd gone through Ranger School, Airborne School, Special Forces, one tour in Vietnam already. And these guys were just getting off the plane like it was their senior trip, you know, and for many it was. So I realized that I was going to, you know, you obviously have to lead people in a different way, and you have to oversee people, and even, you know, and like I got 2 new lieutenants in the next day, and unfortunately I got my other lieutenant back out of hospital, so now I had 3 lieutenants, platoon leaders. Now I had the Ranger lieutenant. He was the most senior lieutenant. He'd already been a platoon leader for 6 months, and it was time for him to move up and become the company executive officer, which he didn't want to do. But I had to put him in there. I needed to have that executive officer. So, and then you got the first sergeant. I had a first sergeant, an older guy, was a Signal Corps first sergeant, really, and he didn't want to go to field. He was 40-something years old. He just wanted to go back home to Fort Bragg and retire. He was a good guy. He was a good first sergeant, but man, he wasn't going to field. You know, and then later on, when Colonel Herbert was battalion commander, he got me an airborne Ranger first sergeant, and I couldn't keep him out of the field, you know. And I would say, first sergeant, you know, but it's the old story, you know. I would rather be grabbing some guy by the shirt and pulling him back, you know, as opposed to pushing a wet noodle up the hill, you know, that kind of thing. So anyway, he and I had he was good. He was a good first sergeant. He really was. The other big difference was, while I was there, Colonel Herbert obtained for us these brand new Starlight scopes that were handheld, and you could attach them to an M16, but they were handheld. And so we broke our patrols down into like a fire team size, 4 or 5 guys, and then I sent them out with a Starlight scope at night, and they could set up a hasty ambush, and they could do this and they could do that. We scored a lot of body count that way. It was kind of a, you know, a different way. It was a cat and mouse game at that time, and so you're always trying to figure out ways to beat the enemy. I got to go back to talk about Colonel Nicholson real fast, because this is something that was an incredibly stupid thing that I did. Okay, Nicholson came out on one operation, and he said he landed, and we had landed southwest of Ankh. It was a hurry up mission. They took us down to Ankh. It's a long story behind that, but we're out there, and the sun's gone down. You're flying in. I got a map. I mean, we got resupplied, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, we know we're going to the landing zone. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put the company that night, where I'm going to set up ambushes, what have you. Totally unfamiliar territory. And we land, and Nicholson says, "I'm here to lane grade the lane grader." And we immediately had a dispute. He goes, "Aren't you just going to set up here on the LZ tonight?" And I said, "No, sir. We're gonna leave." I said, "Because the VC will be here tonight, scrounging the ration for the rations, and not only that, they'll mortar this LZ." And I said, "We'll leave a stay behind ambush, you know, but we're leaving." He goes, "No, I think we just had to stay here for the night." I went like, "No, sir." I said, "You can relieve me as company commander." I said, "But we're leaving. You could stay, but we're leaving." So he went with me, and we're all tucked in for the night in a big depression out there under some big trees that have been blasted, and we got ambushes set up all around us. And all of a sudden, gets dark. All of a sudden, you hear mortar rounds coming in on the landing zone. And I rolled over, looked at him, I gave him a big smile, and he looked at me, he goes, son of a bee, And so he got on me the next day because some of my platoons were that was the big one, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That you're showing. But the next day, he was on me. My platoons were lost. They're going through tall elephant grass. It was a real difficult movement. And he was just on me. And then the medic had been operating on this boil on my arm for like days. And now it was the day he was going to pop it. And it was like tremendous pain. And he put some lidocaine in around the boil. I'm standing there, almost passed out. And I'm weak at the knees, literally. And Nicholson came over and said, "What's the matter? Big bad Special Forces Ranger, can't stand a little pain?" And I'm going like, geez, this is all I need, And so I had the medic. I laid down in a poncho and stuck out my arm, and the medic continued working on my arm, and he got the boil out. And I recovered. And a little while later, as we're waiting for the platoons to kind of get unlost, and he's on me, about being a lane grader and all this kind of stuff. And by that time I'd had it. So he sat down and he took off both jungle boots and both socks, and he powdered his feet. And I walked around behind him, and I whipped out my little Army green notebook, and I went, "To Ranger Lieutenant Colonel Jack Nicholson, from Captain James Grimshaw, Ranger Lane Grader. Subject, -25 bad spot report." And I said, "At this location, at this time, you were observed not being 50% alert. A Ranger is always at least 50% alert. You had both boots off, both socks off, when you're supposed to only take one boot and sock off at a time, as taught in Ranger School. Signed, Captain Grimshaw." I ripped that out of the notebook, and I handed him that note. Nobody else saw it except me and him. And I know I saw smoke coming out of his ears, and magically his RTO got on. Next thing you know, his CNC shipped, and he got out of there. And I can tell you that the day before he left the command, before he's turning over the battalion, he called me in and chewed my butt severely, called me a wise ass, which I was, and threatened me with my career, and he's still alive. I talk to him every now and then because he's a good guy, and I really wanted to go see him and talk about this particular incident, because I don't know if he remembers it or not, but I wanted to go shake his hand and have a little closure over it. But yeah, he was not happy with me. And looking back at my career, I go like, well, that was not the smartest thing to do, at the time. But I had it with him, and I hate that when people do that to me. So anyway, but he had set that thing up for himself for months by I'm here to lane grade the lane grader. I hate lane graders, and I said everybody hates their lane graders. Ranger School, But anyway, but commanding company is a totally different ballgame. It really is.
When did you graduate Ranger School? I forgot to ask that initially.
Oh, well, I graduated November 22nd, 1963. Does that date ring a bell with you?
That is the day before JFK was killed, wasn't it? Or the day he was killed?
He was killed. We graduated from Ranger School in the morning, and we got in our little second lieutenant mobiles and traveling across country. I was traveling across Georgia to visit my relatives in Savannah. and then of course I heard that on the radio en route. You know, the whole country shut down. Yeah, so that's a day you don't forget. I mean, something like that.
Two big things: Ranger School and the loss of one of our
Yeah,
greatest modern presidents.
yeah, and you don't. I mean, and you didn't realize what that meant, because that changed the whole rendezvous with destiny. It really did. Uh, you know, Kennedy changed. You know, because Johnson came in and took over. You know, the whole. I mean, everything then got. It was now you're going full bore into Vietnam. Kennedy was really thinking about pulling out. I mean, yeah, I got to tell you this story. When I was a lieutenant in the 82nd, General York was a division commander. Okay, General Robert York, and we got a thing one day that said an NCO and officer call at Lee Fieldhouse on Saturday morning, very cold January morning, and it was right after it was announced that General Westmoreland was going to be the new Comus MACV. Westmoreland at that time was the 3-star 18th Airborne Corps commander. Anyway, that announcement comes. York has all the officers and NCOs come to Lee Fieldhouse, and they checked off our names as we went in the fieldhouse. They had MPs out there. And I thought that rather strange. They had guards, you know, they were guarding. They locked the doors, and we're all sitting in the bleachers. And General York went out in the center of the basketball court, and he said, I want to tell you a little story how I became the 82nd Airborne Division commander. And I was, you know, everybody's like, oh, you know, what's this all about? And, you know, we wondered why we were called in. And he says, I was in Vietnam as a brand new 1-star general working on General Harkin's staff. He said, I was sent around the country to observe and analyze and report as to what, you know, the readiness was of the South Vietnamese army. He says, I wrote reports that were scathing, saying that these people are not good fighters. They're not well organized. They are going to lose. And I sent my reports in to General Harkins, and General Harkins didn't like my reports. He says, I got sent home in disgrace because I had this disagreement with General Harkins over how the war was going at the time. This was during the advisor phase, okay? And like in 64, 65 timeframe. And well, even before that, in 1963, 62, 63, and because that's when York was there before Kennedy got killed. Okay, and so he says, I got sent home in disgrace. I went to the Pentagon. I had an office and I had a desk, and nobody ever came by. I wasn't included in anything. Didn't have anything to do. They was going to be forced to retire as a 1-star. He says, and one day, I got a call and said the President of the United States wants to see you. And he went over there. Kennedy brought him into the Oval Office and said, General, he says, I get all these reports from McNamara and from General Harkins and saying that we ought to increase our advisors in Vietnam and we ought to put American troops and this and that into Vietnam. He says, but all your reports say that we ought not to go there, that this is the wrong thing to do. We ought not to, at that time, we ought not to increase any military advisors because it's the wrong thing for America to do. And he says, you're one of the few dissenters. I want to know why you say these things. So York told him. And Kennedy said at the end of the discussion, okay, General, what would you like to do? He says, sir, he says, I'd like to command the 82nd Airborne Division. And Kennedy said, you're now a Major General and you're going to command the 82nd Airborne Division. But what York was saying to us was that this was now 1964, after Kennedy was killed. and Westmoreland is going to be Comus MACV. What York was saying to us, he said, I know all you young officers and NCOs, you want to go over there and get the CIB, and you want to get Silver Stars, and you've trained all these years to be a warrior. You want to go over there and prove to your country that you're capable of doing this and have a great career, et cetera, et cetera. He says, I'm here to tell you, this is not what you want to do. That you're going to go based on the policy. You're going. You'll get your wish. But this is not what America, and this is how I got to be the 82nd Airborne Division Commander. And he said, and right after I got assigned, he says, then Kennedy got killed. Kennedy got assassinated. And so we came out of there with a little different perspective. We weren't sure if we believed everything he said, but at the same time, we kind of knew which direction we were going. That's all there was to it. The interesting thing about that is that York never, as a general, he never went back to Vietnam. He became a 3-star, and eventually he went down to infantry school for a while, and then he became a 3-star and commanded 18th Airborne Corps, and he retired. He never went back to Vietnam. And you go back and probably you could figure out why, because he was one of the dissenters, And so that it's an interesting, I don't know how many guys in my time frame remember that, but I surely do, because I came away from there with a different perspective of what it was. And then later on, when I went to Special Forces, in Special Forces officers course at the time, it's not like the selection course they have today. We went to the field, I guess it was called Cherokee Trail or something, for 2 weeks at the end of the whole course or something. But it was a gentleman's course, and we did a lot of academics, and we read a lot of books about Vietnam history and guerrilla warfare and the OSS and all this kind of stuff. So fiction and nonfiction, of course. So yeah, and we got a little bit more academic approach about what was going on in Vietnam during that course. But I can tell you, after my first tour in Vietnam, I came home and I went like, I'm told I'm going to go back a second tour, and I had some doubts, and then after I came back from my second tour, I was like, I don't think I want to do this again. And I can tell you, I went to the career course after that, and at the end of the career course, when the infantry officer's assignment guy came down there, he was on stage talking to us, and he got up there in front of class and he said, and some of you guys are going to go back to Vietnam for your third tour. And there were guys that got up in class. We're talking captains and majors now. There were some guys that got up in class and said, I've already had 2 tours in Vietnam. You see that guy over there? He's only had 1 tour. I'm not going back my third tour before he goes back for his second tour. And it got downright nasty. It really did. In fact, the assistant commandant of infantry school came in and chewed our butts afterwards for the way we acted. But our class was like, hey, yo, wait a minute here, And but that was, by that time, it was 1970, and but by that time, people had enough of Vietnam, to include your standing army, because Vietnam ruined the army. It really did. It was just we were psychologically, I would say, in shambles in a way. Because we knew this was a lost cause, and America's moms and dads, they didn't want to be sending their kids over there to get killed in something. We weren't there to win, we weren't there to win. So that was our problem with our strategy. We had we had a strategy 1 year at a time. Okay, we didn't have an overall strategy, and we never really had a good strategy. The body count strategy was like, well, you killed 5 today, and 25 guys showed up the next day. Take their place. So that wasn't too good a strategy either. That aside from then all the leadership considerations that you have within the
Oh,
Oh, what?
oh, there we go.
What?
We've lost your audio, Mr. Jim. Mr. Jim, your audio's down. Guys, hang on a second. Jim doesn't know he's without audio. Your audio. I can hear somebody on his end, guys. It sounds like I can hear somebody else talking. I think his Bluetooth is hooked up to his phone or something, because I'm hearing people talk in the background. Sounds like a lady. We don't have you anymore. I apologize. Yeah. Yep, I've got you now.
Okay, you got me now. All right, let's go back
Yep.
to it. All right.
No video, or no picture, but we've got we've got audio now.
Okay.
We're about to get into JCRC, guys, JPRC, and then get into his work, his acting work. So
There we go.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't know where we left off.
I think we're about to start finishing up with JPRC, then acting, but I've got a big question, because he always comes up, and I know you had a little bit experience with him. I don't know when exactly, but didn't you work with Mr. Walt Shoemate?
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't really know Walt until I got to the 7th Special Forces Group to 75, 78. And he was in 2nd Battalion, and I was in 1st Battalion. And then I became the S3 Group Operations Officer. And Walt, I mean, I knew his reputation. I knew how well respected he was. And I got to know him over a period of time. And then, every now and then he would, at the end of the day, he would come up, he would pop his face into the Group S3 shop and talk with my sergeant major and a couple of the NCOs, and he'd stick his head in the door. Hey, sir, how you doing? And we would talk a little bit. I really had tremendous respect for him. Like I said, I didn't work directly with him, but I knew about him. And I had those conversations with him. I mean, what a super guy! What a super guy! He really was. Walt was, yeah. It's you know, we had a lot. Special Forces is like any other unit. You've got some really great guys. You got a lot of mediocre guys, and you got guys down at the bottom end of that spectrum. But Walt certainly is one of the top guys ever, in my opinion.
Legendary.
Yeah, he's legendary. There's I don't like to use that word legendary, because somebody called me a legend once, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm old."
Well, I mean, you guys are. I mean, you guys are pretty legendary.
Well,
And
Walt,
we're
Walt certainly,
oh,
he-
he's got a aura about him that everyone, like you said, when he entered a room, everyone immediately knew and looked in his direction. He commanded that
absolutely,
attention and respect.
absolutely. And when Walt spoke, you listened. Okay, you got years of experience. He was just a super guy. That's all I can say. And Sammy Hernandez is another guy that comes to mind. It's just what a super soldier he was, and a super guy. And I
Absolutely.
see him now and then because he's in the Georgia chapter of Special Forces Association. Yeah, I could go on and on. Unfortunately, I think Harry Golden's passed away, and Bill Kindle we know has passed away, but I also have to mention Lynn Steele again, and so forth. And my dog is outside barking. That's the insistent bark that he wants to come inside the house. I think my wife will get there in a minute. I don't know.
Okay, I was about to say if we need to take a break and make a part 2 for the dogs, we can. I understand. I've got dog issues all the time, so
I'm good. He'll be all right. I just what it is next door they got a little bit of a tree cutting operation going on at the property next door. Oh, there we go, JCRC.
Yeah, folks are very interested about JCRC. Could you speak a little bit about what y'all were working on and what that group was all about?
Well, JCRC was founded, I think, in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, and General Bob Kingston was the first commander of it, and then when I got there, General Joe Ulatowski. The job was to account for and to find and account for POWs and MIAs of the Vietnam era in the various countries over there, Southeast Asia, and initially with Kingston they had 2 field elements, and within those elements they had search teams, and all those guys were Army guys on the search teams, and they all just happened to be Special Forces qualified. And initially, one team was commanded by then Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Beckwith and the Lieutenant Colonel Sully Fontaine. And the search teams were commanded by Special Forces captains, and then you filled it with the NCOs. And that photo that you're showing right there, that photo was arranged by Colonel Fontaine. There we were with our maroon berets on, because there were no Special Forces units in Thailand at that time. Okay, so politically we couldn't wear it. We were not. That field element was part of JCRC. We were not a Special Forces unit per se. So Fontaine got it authorized for us to wear maroon berets at that juncture. And that day we took that photo. We took one photo with maroon berets on, and then we took a 5-minute break, and then we put on our green berets and took a photo with that. And but I'll give credit to Sully Fontaine was the field element commander at the time. That's a picture of me, the one you just flipped up there quickly. That's a picture of me after Fontaine retired, and I took over the field element command at that time, and during that time in 1975, yeah, there I am. At that time, we were running the Cambodians and Vietnamese refugee camp over next door over in Utapao, Thailand. JCRC headquarters there, in my office. That was at Samisan, Thailand, and but the refugee camp was 4 or 5 miles away over at Utapao, on the Utapao air base, on the cliff there outside the base, overlooking the South China Sea. And that, so we were working then with the State Department and other federal agencies. The U.S. Air Force over there at Utapao, they supported us very heavily. Their Red Horse engineer unit supported us, and I have to mention that because they built all the flooring for the tents and put the tents up. They built the latrine, the showers, and then the U.S. Air Force logistics folks, they provided 3 meals a day for the refugees and so forth. We strung barbed wire around the camp, and we had Thai Navy guards were discreetly positioned outside the camp. They were armed, but they were to basically remain out of sight most of the time. We didn't want to give the refugees the thought that they were interred in a some sort of armed camp, and being held there forcibly against their will. The reality was that they couldn't leave the camp. We had one girl of dubious background come in from Cambodia, and she didn't think she was treated very properly, and she managed to sneak out of camp when somebody wasn't looking, and it was easy to do, because, like I said, because we didn't have guards posted everywhere, and we, the guys were doing their thing, and so anyway, she left the camp, and some horny Air Force guy came along in a vehicle and picked her up and took her out to the main gate because she said she spoke English, and so he thought he was doing a girl a favor, took her out there, and of course when she got there, the Thai Navy security people knew what was going on. We called them up and said she was escaping the camp, and the
State Department.
Yeah, the Thai Navy guy, is security guy, and I told her, I said, put her on the phone, and I told her, she understood it good English, and I said, I'll let you out of camp into Thai authorities' hands if you like. I said, but they're going to throw you in jail, and you're going to be in a lot worse conditions than you are in this camp. I hope you understand that. So by that time, Master Sergeant, or then Sergeant First Class Brakeman, pulled up in the Jeep, and they threw in a Jeep, and he brought her back to camp. Yeah, we had that happen one time, but we had the Cambodians in first, and then the Vietnamese came in, and there was some concern that historically the Cambodians and the Vietnamese did not get along. So and I think my team sergeant, Sergeant Major Master Sergeant Isley, who's a great guy. I think he came up with the idea, but I went out there, and I had the Cambodians. I briefed them. They were there first. I said, you guys take this part of formation, and I Vietnamese. And of course, we had former military guys, so they understood what we were doing. I said, you have your formation with Vietnamese over here, and the NCOs trotted out a little box, and I stood up on a box in front of a lectern, and I said, okay, most of you are basically military people, so you'll understand what I'm about to say. I said, the Cambodians were here first. You're A company. Vietnamese, you're second. You're B company. And consider me your battalion commander. They got the message, And I said, and if you create any problems, you're out of here. You don't go to America, and that was that was essentially the way we dealt with it. But I was walking around through the refugees, and it was a very tall Vietnamese refugee, very tall guy. And he said to me, he says, Major Grimshaw. And I said, yes. And I realized the guy spoke pretty good English. And he said, were you ever at boot up? And I said, well, yes, I was. He goes, well, he says, I was a CIDG child. He says, and I was at boot up. I grew up at boot up. And I said, really? And he says, and he says, do you remember the day that the days that the CIDG decided to, they inducted their children into the CIDG. They put them through some sort of quick form of boot camp and made them crawl on their hands and knees around the camp through barbed wire, and carry heavy loads in a rucksack and put them on a march and all this kind of stuff. I said, yeah, so it was a torturous 3 days for you guys, as I recall. He goes, yeah, he said, I was one of the kids. He says, and he says, I grew up and I learned how to speak English and I became an interpreter. And he says, then I went to the Mike Force, and then he showed me his airborne tattoo and the Mike Force tattoo on his arm. I said, I can see why you fled Vietnam. I said, you're a dead giveaway who you work for. And his English was so good that our NCOs like Larry White and J.C. Clark and the guys, who actually, my NCOs ran the camp on a daily basis, and they put him to work in the admin tent when he was there, because he was just really good about dealing with people. He spoke English perfectly, and I don't know whatever happened to him, but anyway.
One of the more interesting facts before we get into your amazing acting career, which a lot of people are already leaving comments about, but and quick clarification, I know you've got so much dates in your mind, but the JPRC was created September 17th, 1966, because shortly thereafter Colonel Jacks ran a Operation Crimson Tide, which they were a part of, and it went terribly, terribly wrong. So it started in 67, but all of the big work that you guys were doing didn't start till later on.
It was a joint personnel recovery at the time, JPRC, and then it went into there 73. They changed it to JCRC.
And can you talk a little bit? This is another thing that people, for some reason, y'all don't get spoken about as much as all of the other units and everything. But I like to, when people ask me what exactly it is, I like to say it's, like you said, a joint bright light operation, and body recovery. And the big thing is, guys, Larry White has a wonderful photo out to where they're wearing the orange patches and all that. They've got their Swiss seats and headphones on, but no weapons. They're strictly going out to recover bodies.
Right, and you see, that was a big political issue. No weapons. In I think it was December of 73. Captain Dick Rees, REES, led one of our search teams out there. They landed in South Vietnam and at this crash site, and see that the procedure was that they'd have the South Vietnamese Army go out there the day before and clear the area. Okay, so the area was supposed to be cleared, but when they landed, the Viet Cong were there, and they started firing them up, and of course, the Americans were unarmed. They couldn't even have a shotgun to ward off a snake or a wild animal, what have you. So I wasn't there. This is only what I've read about, and so I could be easily corrected on this. But the story is that Rees put up his hands to show that he didn't have any weapon, and to surrender to these guys. He didn't want any harm come to his people, but they killed him. They killed him right there on the spot, and anyway, it was a mess. So we never did that again. Okay, we never did that again. Now, the whole idea was that you go to a crash site, and if it was a Navy crash site, you would have a Navy crash site investigating officer with you. You would have a forensic specialist there, especially when you're looking at remains, and so forth. So make sure you don't damage remains, all this kind of stuff. So you put together a composite team, task organize it. But the basic element of it was the special forces guys. Yeah, there you go. You see a little shot of it there. In fact, that's Colonel Fontaine, I think, in the front there, if I'm not mistaken.
And Mr. Reese, I believe, right here pictured too.
Yeah. So, and when you talk about the orange, some of that was for identification from the air. You could easily see the guys from a helicopter, what they were doing and so forth. But yeah, I wasn't there. I didn't get to JCRC till August of '74, and by that time, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had reduced JCRC to one field element. And so Beckwith went home. He made full colonel, and he went to Special Warfare School to take over the Special Forces Training Group. And Sully Fontaine remained in Thailand. It was an unaccompanied tour, but Fontaine was allowed to have his wife there. And anyway, he ultimately retired, was forced to retire from the Army. And at that point in time, well, actually before he retired, the JCRC commander made me the commander. There's a lot of long stories attached to that, and don't need to get into it here. But that's how I became commander. And I was on the JCRC staff in the J3 section initially. Then I was assigned as Fontaine's deputy commander, and then Sully was left to go to Guam as a senior Army guy who knew something about refugees. And at that point in time, the JCRC commander put me in charge of the field element.
Wow.
And then Fontaine came back before I retired, and then there were some real issues there. Fontaine unfortunately felt that he was still in command when he left to go to Guam, and at first they made me the acting commander, and so I was told not to rock the boat, but the JCRC commander, and just go out there and just keep everybody's head above the water. And okay, fine, so I'm the acting commander. But the problem was, if I went out there and gave the least administrative instruction, it never got fulfilled. And Fontaine would call in at night, and he would countermand any order that I gave.
Oh my God.
So you got the NCOs who were loyal to Fontaine because he had commanded them for quite a while. Okay. And you couldn't blame them. All right. And so finally I had it one day, and I blew my stack, and I went, and I already had my orders to go home to 7th Special Forces Group. So I went back from the camp, and I went back to my BOQ, and I called Colonel Ward, who was Lieutenant Colonel Ward, was one of the finest Marine Corps officers that I ever met in my life. He was a J3, and I had worked for him. He was a frozen chosen guy, from the Korean War, direct commission, just a super leader. And I called him up, and I said, "Sir," I said, this acting commander thing. I said, Fontaine's he's not gonna relinquish anything. I said, and he's countermanding my orders. He's creating problems. I said, the NCOs, they're going to listen to Fontaine because they've been told by Fontaine that he's still a commander. And in fact, he wasn't. And so there was a real leadership issue there. And so Ward, I said, I'm ready to go and tell Colonel Vollmer, who was the JCRC commander at the time. I said, I'm ready to go in and tell Colonel Vollmer that, I'm out of here. If I, I said, if we can't resolve this, I'm out of here. So Chuck Ward, being the great leader he was, he said, Jim, he says, hang tough. He says, I'm going to go see Vollmer right away. So he went into Vollmer's office. And about, 10, 15 minutes later, Colonel Vollmer called me. He said, Jim, can you come to my office? Yes, sir. Boom. I was in his office within 2 minutes. And, he sat me down and he said, Jim, I've made a horrible mistake. He said, it's entirely my fault. He says, and I've given Colonel Fontaine the wrong impression. He says, but Colonel Fontaine's personality. I said, yes, sir, I do. And he said, as of this moment, he is no longer in command. And he says, and I will be calling him and telling him that he is no longer in command. He's no longer to call back to the camp and so forth. And you are the commander. And I said, yes, sir. And that was fine. So I got a hold of Sergeant Isley, and I said, I want everybody in here tomorrow afternoon. I think it was like 14:30 or something. For out here at the camp, we're going to have a meeting. Let me get this call and just turn it off there right here.
Yes, sir.
Call from Alabama. Call.
I'm sorry, I can't take your call right now. Actually, they're calling from Alabama, believe it or not.
Yeah, I wonder if it's me, pocket dialing.
But anyway, so I went out to camp. I had the NCOs. They, like I said, they ran the camp on a daily basis. If they had an issue that was above their pay grade, or they thought that I needed to be involved, they give me a call. I go out to camp every day and stick my nose around. But I didn't have to do much. I'd walk around the camp, talk to refugees, talk with the senior leaders, get involved in those ways. And then if the NCOs needed my help, then obviously that's my job. And so they would work a 24-hour on or 48-hour off type shift. It was great. They loved it. Didn't want to, and when I took over as commander, I wasn't going to change anything like that. I mean, it was the right way to do things. And anyway, I went out there the next day with a Jeep trailer full of iced down beer and soda pop, if you will. And I did what they teach you in Ranger School. I got up there and I had people coming off their time off and sat them down. I said, get a beer, whatever you drink, whatever, it's up to you. You can have a beer. And I said, I am the new patrol leader. I said, Colonel Fontaine is no longer your commander. I am your commander. And I want you to understand that. And I understand what your loyalties were to Colonel Fontaine. I said, there's a lot of issues there, a lot of negative issues and I said, but you've got to understand a couple things. First of all, you're still in the United States Army. And second of all, we still work for JCRC. Okay. We still answer to JCRC commander. And I said, even though we are working every day for the State Department and running this camp. And I said, Colonel Fontaine is no longer allowed to come to this camp or to call in. And they understood that. Now, I knew that one of the captains, he was pretty loyal to Fontaine. I had some issues with him, but So I gave, and I said to the NCOs, I said, some of you don't know my background. So I gave them my background, and I had as much time in Special Forces as a lot of the guys did, and so forth. And then and I'd been on the A team, and I'd commanded an infantry company and so forth, and I wasn't sure that they quite understood who I was. I didn't know what Fontaine had told them, when I wasn't around. But I knew from the beginning when I was a deputy commander that they thought somehow they got the impression that I was the JCRC spy, okay, sent down from the staff, and because I'd worked on the staff, and I was trying to tell them. I said no, not only no, but hell no, and I said, but you've got to understand, we still work for JCRC. Okay, I mean, so I think there was there were some issues there that had to get talked about and so forth. So yeah, we had a good conversation. It wasn't a one-way conversation; it was two-way, and over time, we got to know each other and trust each other. And what really sealed the deal was that about a day after that, I think it was Sergeant Isley came into my office and he said, "Sir," he says, "I want to apologize to you." I said, "Why is that, Sergeant Isley?" He said, "Well," he said, "I want to apologize on behalf of the team." He says, "Because we were misled." And, he says, I promise you that you'll have our full support and loyalty and so forth. And I appreciated that very, very much. He was true professional, and I liked it because when we went back to Fort Bragg, he went back to the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was in Special Forces, and he came by to visit me. And I thought that was that to me that made me feel very, very, very proud that he took time to come by and say hello. But he ran the team. He was the team sergeant, and he did a great job. I didn't have any real issues. Can I tell you the Larry White story real fast?
Oh, please do, please do.
I think I told you the other day, but I'll try to keep it. When JCRC was kicked out of Cambodia and Saigon and Vietnam and Laos, we had a colonel in charge up there, and so at Saigon was an Air Force full colonel. He was a bona fide bachelor. He was a real bachelor, and he was from Boston, and he was Irish as could be, and he had an Irish temper, and but when one night standing there with the State Department guy and the Vietnamese refugees are getting off the C-130 late at night at Utapao. We're standing there, and the NCOs are directing them to the buses and so forth. And a beautiful young Vietnamese woman with 3 kids went walking by, and the colonel, the colonel looks at me and he goes, "My God, that's a gorgeous woman." I said, "Yes, sir."
Oh no. Oh man. We're definitely gonna have to do a part 2, guys, because he's got several military stories to where he was actually interviewed by 60 Minutes and for an officer calling out the My Lai massacres or before the My Lai, and it's quite the story in itself, and along with his acting. So I think after this we'll try and get into the acting because there's a lot more on that, and depending on how long we go, because we're at 2 hours and 30 minutes, and 3 hours is about as long as I want to go because people will have to stop and break it up. So we'll probably get ready for a part 2 here momentarily. Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder, Jim, if if someone's watching us and censoring us, or Sully has Fontaine has any people working at YouTube. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, every time the phone rings, that happens. Anyway, so this guy was smitten with this woman, and and I never gave any thought about it, but I noticed, like, see, when as an Air Force colonel, he came back. He went to Utapao, and they gave him a BOQ, a nice big trailer, and a staff car. So he didn't have a damn thing to do during the day, and so he kept coming out to camp. He wanted to visit this woman, I guess, and we were like, okay, so she's a good looking woman and all that stuff, but so one day I'm back in the office at Samisan, and the phone rings, and it's Larry White, and he was a senior duty NCO, and he is livid. He is beside. I get smoke was coming through the telephone. Okay, and Larry had that, sir, I want to report, and the way he talked, and Colonel so and so was out here, and he stood me at attention and told me that he was a colonel and I'm a sergeant, and he was taking this woman out of camp because she was complaining she wasn't getting fed right, this kind of stuff. So he took the woman and the 3 kids back to his trailer, and so I said, all right, let me handle this, and I got my Jeep and I drove over to Utapao to where his command trailer was, and I pulled up down the end of the street, and all of a sudden I'm going into this James Bond routine. I'm sneaking up on the trailer, and I'm starting to peek in the window, and I'm thinking to myself, Grimshaw, what the hell are you doing? And I was trying to figure out a way to solve this thing, see? And so I looked at a window, and the woman was sitting there, and the kids were playing on the floor. And I thought, I backed away. I drove back over to JCRC headquarters, and our deputy commander was an Air Force full colonel, super guy. And we all drank together and played poker together at night and stuff like that. We ran together a little bit. And I went in there and I said, sir, I got a problem. He said, yeah, there's Larry. God bless him. And he said, what? I said, Colonel so-and-so took the Vietnamese woman and 3 kids out of camp and stood Larry at attention, blah, blah, blah. So I said, I think we need to handle this 06 to 06. And like that. I said, and Colonel Vollmer was up in Bangkok at the embassy that day. So he wasn't around. Thank God he wasn't around, because he was a straight-laced West Point colonel. I'll tell you. And so Colonel Cawley's the deputy commander. He gets on the phone. he goes, John, I have Jim Grimshaw in front of me, and he says that you have the Vietnamese woman and 3 kids, yada yada, in your trailer, and you stood White at attention, yada yada, and all Jim wants you to do is take the women back to the camp, and the woman and the 3 kids back to camp, and apologize to Sergeant White. That's all he wants to do. He wants you to do. So, Colonel, his Irish temper got the best of him. You could hear him through the phone. He called me all sorts of names, and then he said, and then Cawley was like holding the phone out from his ear, and he said he wants to talk to you. He gets on the phone and he goes, Major Grimshaw. I said, yes, sir. He said, are you standing at attention? I said, no, sir. I'm not going to stand at attention for you. Hey, well, you better goddamn stand at attention. He was furious. And, how dare you, we went through this. So I said, all you got to do is take him back to camp and apologize to Sergeant White, and I'll consider this incident over. Well, I handed the phone back to Cawley. Cawley said, John, last time, that's all Jim wants you to do. Boom. He hung up the phone. He says, And he called you a son of a bitch. He called you up. I said, no, I heard him, you know, and we're laughing by this time, you know. And I said, good thing Colonel Vollmer's not here, you know. I said, we don't want Vollmer to know about this. So I went back to my office. About 20 minutes later, I get a phone call from Sergeant White. Sir, Sergeant White. He brought the woman and his kids back to camp. I said, did he apologize to you? Yes, sir. I said, are you satisfied? Yes, sir. I said, good. End of it. I said, you know, I, you know, to this day, well, what happened? I'll say this much. Fast forward to the time I'm the 7th Group's operations officer. I'm down at Tampa and MacDill, and I'm at a conference at Redcom. And at the end of the day, I noticed this Air Force Full Colonel walk through the side door of the classroom, and I realized who it is.
God.
and he, you know, he greets me like a son, you know, and a brother, if you will, and we were. And he says, I heard you were in town. I want to take you to dinner tonight. I said, okay, sir. He said, but first we're going to go. He was the J2 at Redcom. He had a big position. And he says, but first I want to take you by and introduce you to my staff. And I said, okay. And we went in there, and there's the staff was standing there, and he says, this is the major I was telling you about. He says, I have told them the story of our incident with the Vietnamese lady. And he says, I want you to tell them your version of it. So I did. And
boy, he's lucky he didn't get Larry more mad. Like, you don't want to have Larry White mad at you, boy.
Oh,
That's
no, you don't. I want to tell you, I have great respect for Larry, and I mean what those guys did out there in that camp. You know, they did a tremendous job. They kept the lid on things. They did. I mean, we had a Cambodian major who was the leader of a dissident element among the Cambodians. He wanted to go back to Cambodia, and he wanted to take a group back with him. Well, the former chief of staff of the Cambodian Air Force was the senior Cambodian guy there. And he came to me and he told me what the problem was. And I said, oh boy, here we go. So of course I had to get the State Department involved in this and so forth. And what happened was that eventually the NCOs, they organized a bus, air-conditioned bus, and it stood out there with a manifest. And they wrote their names down in the manifest, checked them off, put them on the bus, and the NCOs were like surrounding the bus, and the bus had a back door to it, a back window, and so some of these guys who said they wanted to go back to Cambodia all along, they got on the bus first and they climbed out the back window. They didn't want the Cambodian major to know that they were staying in camp. Well, it was also rumored that the guy had a pistol. Okay, hidden. He had a 38 revolver. That was a word. So we were all unarmed. Okay, so we had no idea what this Air Force major was going to do then, you know. And so we put these guys in a bus, and it was a fair amount. I can't remember the exact number, but and like I said, there's 3 or 4 guys that went out the window out the back. So I stood there with that major. He's sitting on the bus, and I stood there and get ready to leave. And I said, you understand? I said, I don't understand why you want to go back to Cambodia, because I want to go back to be with my family. I said, well, you understand your family's already dead. And he said, I know that. He said, but in my culture, I must go be with my family. I went, okay. And that was the way we processed it. But I said to him, I shook hands with him, and I said, you're going to be dead by tonight. And he was.
Oh God.
The they unloaded the bus at the Thai-Cambodian border, and we gave them poncho liners and stuff to take with them, and so forth. And they got in single file and walking across into Cambodia, and of course, the Cambodian guards, smiling, taking care of them. When as they got across, they started screaming at them, pointing their weapons at them, put them, and what happened was about 5 of these guys decided they didn't want to go, so they were at the end of the file, and they crossed back into Thailand. Okay, and they went back to the CIA got them, as I understand, but and so these guys go into Cambodia and they're stripped naked, put on the truck, taken around the bend, told to get off the truck, and they had a machine gunner, guys with weapons, and as the reports were that they were all gunned down within probably 10-15 minutes after they crossed the border. And
my God.
So those 5 guys who escaped, they never came back to our camp. But the point is, we got that busload out of camp without an incident. That was the golden moment for us. And it was, I stood there, and supervised and all that kind of stuff. But it was the NCOs who organized it, planned it, and executed it just perfectly. So Larry White and Clark and Brakeman and all those guys, they did a tremendous job with, and with other things. I could go on and on about JCRC stories, especially about the refugee camp. But
we're definitely gonna have to have you back, because we've I'm so constrained for time. We've got a little bit more time today.
Okay.
I was gonna see because people are wanting to hear so much about your acting and all of that, and I was wondering, since we've skipped, like I said, or not skipped, but gone skimmed your military career, I'd like to have you back for a part 2 to where we can get into some of the more intricate stuff and people be able to ask questions. But I think folks would like to hear towards the end, and maybe you update us on you being inducted to the Ranger Hall of Fame, and then maybe I can show the video of you beginning your acting career that I've got that you've sent me.
Great. Yeah. You want to talk about Hall of Fame?
Yes, sir. I'd love that's a huge honor, and I'd love the folks to hear about that.
Well, it is a huge honor. You hear the words honor and humble and things of that nature, and you hear it a lot in a lot of speeches, and I've sat through a lot of Ranger Hall of Fame ceremonies in the past, and for years now, and I never once thought that I'd ever get in the Ranger Hall of Fame. I know that when after I stepped down as president of U.S. Army Ranger Association, I had a few guys call me and say, over a period of time, different times, they say, why aren't you in the Ranger Hall of Fame? And I would say, well, first of all, nobody's ever nominated me. Well, eventually somebody nominated me, and a command sergeant major that I worked with in Florida Ranger Camp, he didn't want me to say his name during my Hall of Fame speech, but his name is Bill Smith, and I love him dearly. And he's the guy who started the nomination. He started the whole process. And so I have him to thank, and I have the U.S. Army Ranger Association, one of the recent past president, Jeff Wright, and Gary Dolan, the Ranger Hall of Fame coordinator. I have those guys to thank for what they did. Frankly, back in February, I was told that I probably wouldn't. My Ranger Hall of Fame packet was in, and it was what's the best word for it? He said that it was one of the best packets that they've seen, in a long time, and so forth. But they had some other guys that they wanted to get there first, and my packet probably would be forwarded to the Ranger Hall of Fame Selection Board in 2024. And I said, okay, great. I mean, it's just the fact that I'm being nominated. That was a cool part. And so I didn't think much more about it, because the beginning of this year, we were coming up in June, where we were getting ready to have 2 great grandchildren being born, and a couple other family events, this and that. We had the baseball game to think we talked about at the beginning. We had oh gosh, it's just lots of stuff going on, and we were going to Nashville to the 173rd Brigade thing and so forth. But so I was up in Canton at my daughter's house, and it was a Friday night, and I got a call on my phone, and I I didn't know who it was. First I thought it was a scam call, and then I realized that it was Candace Bryant. It said, she texted me and said, "You're trying to call you Candace Bryant, Ranger Hall of Fame coordinator." And I went, what is she calling me about? So I got a hold of her. I stepped outside in the deck, and she goes, "Congratulations, you're going to be inducted in 2023." Well, that smoked me, man. I cried. I went in. We're having the family inside, and there's a lot of talk going on with the granddaughter and this and that, and everybody's talking. And finally, I just stood there and I looked at everybody, and I said, "I hate to interrupt." I said, "I just got a phone call. I'm going to be inducted in the Ranger Hall of Fame." So we went on about that. It was a truly humbling moment when I heard about it. And of course, when you sit up on that stage and you realize that you are going to be inducted, and you're sitting around the other inductees, and for me, especially, I was sitting right next to Dick James. Dick and I served in the 173rd Airborne Brigade together at the same time. Okay, so and we known each other for years. So there was all of that, and so that ceremony and the moment that they do it happens fast, and then the thing about it was that. Before I went up there, I said to my wife, I said, "I want you to read my speech that I wrote." And she read it. She goes, "That's a dumb speech." I don't think you.
Oh.
I went, like, dumb. So I wrote 3 more speeches. One was a little bit more political, and this about it, address this, address that, and so forth. And so finally, after a while, I was like, I was tired of writing speeches. So I went to Ranger Hall of Fame. I left my speech at home, and the first thing I said to everybody was that my wife told me I can only speak for 3 minutes, and if I go more than 3 minutes, she's going to come up here and pull me.
Hook you off.
So, and it was great because also that Lieutenant General retired Ken Keene was there on the stage. He was the Ranger Hall of Fame president at the time, and he was there. And I knew him when he was a lieutenant colonel and commander, 1st Ranger Battalion. And of course, Joe Votel was supposed to get inducted, but he wasn't there. He had a conflict in the schedule. But I knew him when he came in and took over after Ken Keene was the 1st Ranger Battalion commander. So I knew them both when they were both lieutenant colonels and followed their careers and so forth. So it was really a very interesting moment. And excuse me, it happened fast. You as it sinks in, you realize that this is a real lifetime achievement. then you go like, well, man, lifetime achievement. Wait a minute, that means you're getting old, you know. and I am. Let's face it. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm in tears.
The men you were honored with, I mean, two of them, or I know one of them, Mr. Marshall Huckabee was one of the initial Nha Recondo School graduates that you know, and of course you mentioned Lieutenant Colonel James. The next people in are Rick Merritt, who's a legend in the GWAT Ranger era. Command Sergeant Major, and he's got the biggest fruit salad I've ever seen. He was on Gothic Serpent in Mogadishu, Grenada, New Dawn, and then two generals from SOCOM. So you were right there amongst giants, and you being one of the giants. So, and while we're speaking of this, part two, I've already telling people saying we got to have a part two. I would like to do, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm sure you've got enough to speak about. We'd love to have you on to speak about the Ranger School specifically. I think that would be a great episode for you to cover your experiences.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, that would be great. Well, I listen. I appreciate for.
We were going to go into if you didn't mind. We've got another 10 or 15 minutes. Would you mind let me show with the video of your highlights, and then you speaking a little bit about Magnum and everything, and we'll close it out for the day?
Oh yeah, that'll be great. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Okay, let me pull up the video you graciously sent to me, and a lot of if y'all are my age, y'all are gonna remember all of these parts, especially the Remember the Titans. I grew up on that movie, and
first this morning.
Here we go to see Mr. Jim in it is amazing. This is a little reel.
In number 86-1278, Hustler Magazine and Larry C. Flint versus Jerry Falwell.
You know, I gotta tell you, that really bothers me. Somebody calls me son.
Then how about if I call you asshole?
By the way, Hal, since we're being deployed, they're renumbering the units. You're now the commanding officer of the 1st Battalion of the 7th Cavalry.
7. Same regiment as Custer.
Did the doorbell ring, or was it just a knock?
Why?
Helps with the profile. Certain criminals knock, others ring doorbells.
You understand what I'm saying? This guy is dangerous.
Probably that's why he's called a criminal.
Are they out of the race yet? They will be in about 45 seconds.
Good game, Coach. Coach.
Wow.
There's young Adam with fresh beef.
Outstanding.
Outstanding. How about that, guys? How about that for a reel? Man, that is several of those movies I grew up on, and especially, like I said, Remember the Titans is one of my all-time favorite movies. And there you are. Jason sharing the screen with Mel. We Were Soldiers is probably my all-time favorite war movie. Just outstanding. And I've got a photo of you with Magnum. Can you, while I'm pulling up this photo, or not on Magnum, can you speak a little bit about how your work into becoming a thespian started?
Okay, well, I've done theater before I joined the Army. I spent about 2 years doing community theater. And got back into it while I was in the Army when I was bored at my work or whatever. Did several productions at Fort Bragg Playhouse. And then when I got to Hawaii, let me plug this. Hold on just a second. I got a low power mode on my phone. Just a,
Yes, sir.
yeah. We'll get this going here. And hang on. There we go. Now we're good to go. The and so when I got to Hawaii, when I first got there, my job was kind of slow rolled. We weren't getting anything done the way we wanted to, but it wasn't our fault. But so I was getting used to the job and so forth, and I did a play at the Honolulu Community Theater called Separate Tables, and it was the first full year of Magnum PI, and the casting ladies came. They came to see other actors and other actors who had they had worked with on the original Hawaii Five-0, the Jack Lord series, and they didn't know me from Adam. But anyway, the casting lady said I was a new face in town, and she said, "How would you like to become an extra?" And which I did. At Magnum PI, my God, it was a dream come true to be an extra. And I was like, my first extra role, I was a security guard way off in the distance. You couldn't even tell who I was. I was carrying an M16, and it was like a 3-second shot on screen at the most, And but in that working that day, I got to know the second unit director, Bruce Shirley, and who was a Universal Studios director. And about a year later, I tried out for a few auditioned for a few acting roles, and I didn't get selected. I didn't know anything really about television and movie acting. I knew a lot about theater, but not TV. And it's a whole different way you do things. And so Bruce called me up and said, I understand you're going to be down here tomorrow to audition for the role. That's the photo that you just showed of me as the Air Force major. I said, yeah. And he says, well, just got word. This is confidential. Universal's going to do a 2-hour. Yeah, there's the photo. Universal Studios is going to do a 2-hour special of Magnum, first ever. And we need a military tech advisor. And Bruce and I got to know each other over the past year about my background. And he said, "You're the guy." So I got selected for a 1-hour episode as an actor, and then I got selected for their first 2-hour episode, and where they're going back to Vietnam and so forth. And I took 2 weeks off, 2 weeks leave, and did the show. But throughout the next 4 years, I'd go work a day here and there, and then I'd make $100 a day. And then I did 3 different acting roles over a period of 4 years. And because they only let you do 1 acting role a year. That was their policy. If you're just, coming on as a bit player. But I went down a lot as a military tech advisor. And then I went back for a 2-hour episode after I retired from the Army, not long after I retired. But I was, it was a very interesting moment. I was at the Chapter 8 Special Forces meeting on a Friday night when the episode was being aired. I said to the people in the chapter, I have to leave now. I'm going to go home and watch myself on TV. And what I didn't know was that it had been arranged that everybody would come by my quarters after the show. And then we had a big party. but I sat there and I watched myself on TV. And of course, you always think you gave this kind of performance. And then when you see yourself, you go like, wow, I could have done better, who's that guy and so forth. And I sat there and, all I could think of was all those years that all those little skits in school and the school play and community theater, the Fort Bragg Playhouse, all the things. I mean, I can remember at Fort Bragg, you know, they would say, "Why do you do theater? You're in special forces. You have this job. Why do you do theater?" I said, "Well, look, some officers like to play golf on Saturday and Sunday. I don't play golf. I like to do theater. I think it's fantastic, you know." And anyway, yeah. So my first night, I thought about that. I sat there and tears ran down my face when I saw myself on TV. And then all of a sudden there's honkings of horns and people are coming in the front door, you know, and we're having this party, you know. I was happy about that until I got the bill for the beer. But yeah, and I did 3 more episodes as an actor on Magnum. Before I actually left Hawaii as still on active duty, I did a show called Hawaiian Heat. Remember that? And it only ran about 7 episodes, and I got called to come back, and they were going to put me on 3 other episodes throughout the year if I came back. I was playing a cop, and I was really happy about that. And then I got a call the next day and said, "No, the show's been canceled by ABC." And then the next day, the same casting guy called me up and said, "Hey, you coming to Hawaii anyway? Magnum PI wants you to have you back here as an actor and as a military tech advisor." And I can remember when I went back for that show, I get killed off in the beginning as I'm a mercenary in Cambodia. Robert Forster was the guest star, and he gets captured and so forth. But so I'm on the show, and so I was standing off the set after we did my stuff, and it was just, you know, just one scene where I had lines, and I was just kind of standing there looking in space, looking around, and Tom Selleck walked up to me. He goes, "What you thinking about, Jim?" I said, "Well, Tom, I was thinking about how I'd like to have more lines, you know, a bigger role." And he started laughing. He says, "Did you ever see this movie?" Now I can't remember the name of the movie to tell you the story, but it was a certain movie that he did where everybody was asleep in hammocks and so forth. He goes, "I was one of the extras in there asleep." He says, "That was my role." He says, "Everybody's got to start somewhere, you know." And I said, "Yeah." So, but I appreciate it. If it wasn't for him, he got me started. He's a guy. I mean, there were some actors and producers, some producers and directors, really terrific guys. Charles Floyd Johnson, for example, Ray Austin, director, Mike Vihar, director. Yeah, I mean, these guys taught me the ropes, and so what I did in that period of the year, and then every time I went back working on a show, especially when I was there for 2 weeks, I would hang out. I was forced to hang out with the wardrobe people all the time. We had to make sure the military stuff was right. But I started, I would hang out for a day or two with the camera people, trying to understand what everybody did on the camera crew, the lighting crew, the hair and makeup guys. So I was just trying to learn about the production, and people would say to me, "Well, you're an actor. You're a military guy, and you become an actor. Don't you find that rather strange to work in television and movie productions?" And I said, "Well, no." I said, "You got to understand the similarities. You get a group of people together from diverse backgrounds and talents. You put them together with a single mission. You got to feed them. You got to house them, and you got to get this job done within a certain period of time. And on top of that, as a director, it's like one British director told me. He said, just remember, James, it's about entertaining people. Let's entertain people, And I was doing this. I got to tell you a quick story. My first feature film was King Kong Lives, a movie that people will forget forever. Okay, and it starred John Ashton from Beverly Hills Cops 1 and 2, and Brian Kerwin and Linda Hamilton. And I was a military technical advisor on that, and I was I had one scene as an Army Staff Sergeant in that, and anyway, there's a lot of stories about that movie, but we were going out to the picture wrangler guy who became one of my best friends for life. The picture vehicle guy and I and his assistant, we were flown out to Tooele, Utah, to Salt Lake City, and then went out in the desert to this guy who had these salvaged military vehicles. And my buddy Les Pendleton had a check for like $20,000 deposit to give to the guy, and I had a check to go. I was flying to Chicago the next day to this wardrobe, and these people. It was an old elderly Jewish couple that ran this big warehouse that had all kinds of military uniforms, and I had a check for them. That's where we rented the uniforms. But we're out there, and before we went out to the desert, the British director says to me, he says, he called me in his office, and he said, James, he said, when you go out there, he says, I want you to take a camera, and I want you to line up all the vehicles on the desert, and I want you to take this shot of the vehicles in the attack. And he's going on and on and on. And I said to him, I said, sir, you mean like Montgomery at El Alamein? Oh, yes, of course, Montgomery, El Alamein, of course. Well, we get out there to the desert to this guy this was the guy who did the vehicles, Jack, Tomlin was his name. He had a big red beard. He looked like the real life Yosemite Sam cartoon character. And, and this guy was a shyster. You talk about a con artist, and all he wanted was his money. So I said to him, I said, the director wants me to have you line up these vehicles so I can take this photo like they're in the attack. He says, you don't understand me, son. He says, you don't understand me, son. He says, until that man gives me that deposit check, he says, these vehicles can't even start. I can't even move them, let alone take a picture of them.
Hollywood, man, Hollywood.
Oh yeah. So, but yeah, so we go on about that, but and then I realized I had to dress this infantry company every day. So I said to the wardrobe guy, I said, I'm going to need an assistant to help me out here. And they said they went back to the producer and said, yeah, go ahead, hire somebody. So I got on the phone and I called Stan Olszewicz, who was my former boss in 7th Special Forces Group. And Stan's a legend. Stan's Airborne Ranger Special Forces, Czechoslovakian, came over in the Lodge Act, retired as a full colonel, had Det A at one time, all this kind of stuff. And he was at Operation Eagle Claw, in the desert. And I called Stan and I said, Stan, what are you doing these days? He said, he lives in Fayetteville. And he said, I do nothing. And I said, well, I respected him so much. I didn't want to say, how would you like to come to work for me? I said, how would you like to come and work with me? And we dressed this infantry company. I said, I could really use your help. He goes, okay, I'll be there. I said, but I haven't told you how much I'm going to pay you. And I haven't told you where. He goes, you don't understand. Every year, my wife, Amaka, and I, we have big argument every year, once a year. He says, I need to go away now. I said, okay. I said, 1,800 hours Sunday night at the Holiday Inn in Knoxville, Tennessee, right at the university. That's Sunday night. I said, I'll meet you in a bar, and like a good private soldier, Colonel retired Stan Olszewicz sitting on a bar stool with a beer in his hand, waiting for me to show up. And he, when everybody got to know who he was, right? Especially we had Huey helicopter pilots. These guys went crazy. And so we did helicopter rides, and when we weren't doing other stuff in the Huey and all this kind of stuff. It it was a fantastic experience. Unfortunately, it was a terrible movie. The script was horrible. You know?
Oh man. Guys, some y'all should remember. I mean, this is my favorite episode of Magnum. It's Did You See the Sunrise? If y'all have any way of going back, if y'all have not seen this, and I hope all of y'all being SOG and Special Forces fans saw that episode. If not, go back and watch it. And especially now knowing that Mr. Jim was helping out, and there is that famous last scene. You don't know if he kills him, but he does. But that's the I believe that's the first shot. It's some sort of significance of being the first shot on TV to where I forgot how it's termed, but it was a huge moment in TV.
First time in the Magnum series that you actually saw Magnum pull a weapon and fire at somebody. That was one historical part of it. Okay. The other part of it is that scene was shot in the exact same location in this trench, if you will, this depression, where Jack Lord's character, the last episode of Hawaii Five-0, where he kills Wo Fat. They did that to make it historical. The exact same location. And of course, Bo Svensson played the Russian colonel. He was a wild, crazy guy. You know, I learned a lot from Bo Svensson, and I mean, you know, just hanging around with him. I mean, we were out in the sugarcane fields one day. We're out there where our hunting wagons, our dressing rooms were, you know, and Spencer's out there with no shirt on, a pair of sweatpants, you know, and some girl goes by on a horse, right? And she's riding a horse, go by, and Swenson's running down there, chasing after her, pulling the sweatpants down below his knees.
I can picture that right now. After seeing that picture, I can picture him doing that.
He was fantastic. And Selleck, of course, the great guy, one of the greatest guys I've ever known. I told you the story about making him an honorary Navy SEAL.
Please share that.
When I think it was in my second year, if I'm not mistaken, that I was a tech advisor, and you know, I was sitting around there one day with the director and what have you, and one of the producers, and I said, you know, I said, you got Selleck going back to Vietnam. I said, he's in camouflage fatigues and he does these ground operations, etc. I said, you know, when he's in his dress Navy uniform, I said, he's wearing a naval surface warfare badge. And they said, well, that's what surface means. He was on the ground. I said, no. These guys are ship drivers, you know. If they're aground, they're in trouble. You know. So anyway, I said, really what you could do is make him a Navy SEAL. Now, I of course, I wanted to make him a special forces guy,
right,
but you couldn't do that. And I said, but the easy way to do this is make him a Navy SEAL. And they said, well, let's run this by Don Belisario. And, you know, people don't know it, but Don Belisario was an enlisted Marine during the Korean War. And anyway, so Belisario said, hey, great idea. So we made Tom Selleck a Navy SEAL. He was a recruiting poster for the Navy SEALs. So I go back to I'm working at CINCPAC Special Operations. We had 2 Navy SEALs working for us. And I go back to Mike Tchaikovsky, and I'll be careful how I clean this up here for the podcast. But you know, but I say to Mike, I said, why don't you guys make him an honorary Navy SEAL? But he's not, you know, the Navy SEAL Association. Mike says, great idea. I guess a week or so, 2 weeks go by. Yep, they checked it out. So we arranged to make him a member of the Navy SEAL Association, honorary member. So we're out there doing helicopter scenes, and Mike comes out in his white outfit. We call it, you know, the ice cream outfit. And Mike's all there. We got a photographer and so forth. And I look at Mike, and he's got the plaque, and everything, and we're getting ready to do this thing. And I said, Mike, I said, where's your wife?
Oh no, yeah.
I said, where's your wife? He goes, my wife? You didn't tell me I could bring my wife out of here. I said, you dumb Navy SEAL, So we do the little ceremony. We take the photos. Selleck's a happy guy. Mike's a happy guy. We all just, we go home. And I got home. I got on the phone, and I called Mike's number. And his wife answered the phone. And I said, so I did my best Tom Selleck imitation. I went like, hi, CC, this is Tom. I missed you out there today. Jim Grimshaw, you rotten SOB, you dumb mother trucker. I'm going to kill my husband.
He was livid.
Oh, I said, CC, I'm sorry if your husband's just a dumb Navy SEAL, Well, she was wonderful about it though. And of course, Selleck went on to be a Navy SEAL the rest of the time. Great. It was a walking recruit for these guys, what could you do? But, Selleck is Selleck is a terrific guy. I would say that I went back to do the last 2-hour episode right after I retired, about 3 or 4 months after I retired, December of '84, and I had just been hired to be a GS-11 exercise director for U.S. Army Camp Sama, Japan, and I really needed a steady job, to be honest with you. I won't go into details, but it really would have behooved me to have a steady job. But there I was, 41, 42 years of age, and all my life I wanted to be an actor. That was what I, as a kid, I wanted to be a military guy too, but I wanted to be an actor, and that was one of my dreams. And so I went to civilian personnel office, and I called the civilian personnel in Japan, and I said, I'm turning down a job.
Ooh, wow.
I said, the guy says, why? He says, you know how many colonels and generals have called out here, want to know when you're going to show up? And I said, well, I appreciate that very much. I said, but I've given this considerable thought. And I said, I don't want to work for the government anymore. I said, but beyond that, I've always wanted to be an actor. And if I don't do it now, I'll never get to do it. And so the rest is history. Now, looking back on my few years as an actor, I really enjoyed what I did. I traveled all around the country. I did a lot of things. I hustled my butt off in New York and in LA, and so forth. And when you start out being an actor at 41 years of age, you're
a little behind.
Your career aspirations are very limited. And so I realize that. And, again, you go, it's that Ranger Special Forces thing in you. I'll accept any challenge, and I'll find a way to get over that wall or through that door or whatever. But yeah, and that's that industry.
To give you props. For you to start off, as you say, you weren't that good, and you started off late. But for you to act with Tom Selleck, I'm forgetting Higgins' real name, but he was very accomplished. Mel Gibson, Robert Duvall, Tom Cruise. I'm not sure if you did the Charlie Sheen movie or not, but the list, I've got his IMDb up, and I did have it up, but yeah. You've acted with some of the greatest actors of your generation and my generation. It's just meeting Robert Duvall and you getting to interact with him about some of the Vietnam stuff is another amazing aspect.
Well, that was, we talked about that with Apocalypse Now, what he did in Apocalypse Now and so forth. Really great conversations that we had. One of one of the more interesting conversations I had real quick was when I did the movie Chasers. You saw on the demo tape there where I was the Navy Master Chief at the end, where I say outstanding. That was a movie Chasers starring Tom Berenger, and
Oh wow!
directed by Dennis Hopper. Okay.
Dang.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we shot that scene at the old Columbia, South Carolina jail. Okay. And in between the setups, I sat and talked with Berenger and Hopper, and Tom asked me, did I see the movie Platoon and what did I think of it? And, when they, talk about my Vietnam background and so forth. And, I told him, my thoughts about it. And we had a great conversation. But, I'm sitting there and I'm going like, I'm sitting here with Tom Berenger talking to him about Platoon and Sniper, and all this kind of stuff. And Dennis Hopper, Apocalypse Now, and Giant, and Rebel Without a Cause, and I mean all these things, And I wanted to talk to them about their careers, what they did, and so forth. Some of the more interesting points, and their approach to acting and this and that, all this good stuff. And they wanted to talk to me about being in Vietnam, and so it made for a lightning conversation. And I liked working with Berenger. He's a super guy, and Hopper too, of course.
I grew up with Tom, but not grew up with him, but I grew up watching him. I loved him. I didn't know until later about Platoon when I started getting into everything, but I grew up with him in the baseball movies and as the tired old beat up catcher, Jake Taylor.
Yeah.
God, I loved those Major League Baseball movies with Bob Uecker and all them.
Oh,
I mean, you were, I mean, it's hard to believe. And there, like you said, I find it funny. There they are, normally stars would be, not wanting to talk, and would want to talk about their experiences, but all they're caring about is talking about you. Did you think I did good in Platoon? Did it look real? What was it legit? What
Yeah,
I find that to be amazing that they're more worried about you than.
That was that was it right there, and I talked to him, and the thing about Platoon, and that Oliver Stone, he served in Vietnam, and he had his perception of Vietnam, and he put together in one script a lot of the issues that confronted us as an infantry platoon in Vietnam. What the American public has to understand is that it's a basically a 120-minute movie. Okay, there's a lot they're trying to put in there, and that not every unit in Vietnam had those problems, or not every unit had all those problems at the same time. That kind of thing. But every unit in Vietnam experienced certain problems like that. Over time, over the history of them being in Vietnam, depending on what unit was and so forth. But unfortunately, the movie.
You've got to condense a whole tour into a 90-minute, and it, like you said, there's just so much to.
Yeah, and the thing about it, that was the very first movie that came out about Vietnam. Really, I think Deer Hunter came out before.
Combat, yes, sir.
But Platoon, based on those issues, and I can remember going to theater, and I sat there with my hands on the white knuckled because I didn't know what to expect, and I came out of there, my PTSD was kicking in. Believe me.
My dad had to leave this. My dad couldn't. He got 5 or 10 minutes into it when they got into Vietnam, and he had to. He couldn't stay in.
Yeah, some people, I didn't realize, and when I got out of that movie, I didn't realize I never did, even back in those years, realize that I had PTSD. Okay, I had some people try to tell me that, but when I was getting ready to retire from the Army, PTSD was just really coming into everybody's medical conversation, and the Army was denying, the VA was denying. It was all sorts of things going on there. I mean, I can remember before I retired, and running through my neighborhood, I was jogging, and this was just before I retired, and we had a beautiful neighborhood there in Fort Kamehameha, right along the Pearl Harbor Channel, and coming back from a run, and runners past this doctor's house, and he and his wife were both doctors. They were from Puerto Rico, very smart people, very wonderful people, and he says, "Hey, Jim," and he hailed me down, and he says, "You want a beer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." I was like at the end of my run, so we sat down at the curb and we had a couple of beers together, and he was trying to tell me about PTSD, and he was trying to nicely tell me,
not come on so heavy with you.
Yeah, so some of the things that he had observed about me, that maybe I needed to get into some kind of a program. I was, of course, I would have been in denial at the time. Think the thing back then, right after Vietnam, and if you were an officer or an NCO, and you say to your commanding officer, I want to go over to a hospital because I think I got this thing called PTSD. You were gone. Your career was over.
Oh yeah.
So what did we have? We had divorces. We had situations. We had all kinds of problems. Let's just leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Talking about. And now the Iraq and Afghanistan. I've got a wonderful book by an Afghanistan Special Forces veteran on how he of prose, the fantastic book, and he's boy, when I read it, I was like, oh my God, and he kept asking me over Facebook, have I read it? He asked me if I read it, and I said no, I didn't know. So I bought the book off Amazon, boom, got it, and I started reading it. I got through about 30-something pages, and I said, boy, man, let me tell you, and fantastic book, it really is. And I'm not going to mention it right now. Maybe if we do a podcast, we'll get into
that'll
it.
be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've heck, this is the longest one in history. We've hit 3 hours and 30 minutes today. If it's all right, I've written down because folks would like to get into the bushes, so to speak, and about MACV Recondo and your Ranger experience. So maybe at the start of October we can get our schedules lined up again and do a deep dive on the Ranger school.
October would be good. Yeah, October's good. Well, I mean, we're almost into it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking ahead here real quick without looking at a specific calendar. Yeah, we don't have anything going for us until about the first week of November. We're kind of laying low.
Doing the same here. It's about to be getting the change of weather, so we've got peanut season coming. So I'm definitely staying low, so my allergies and all that don't start messing with me. Yeah. But I went ahead and wrote your name down for the first and second week just so we can plan. And guys, we'll have it out the first or second week of October once we plan and get it set up. But before we close out, Mr. Jim, is there anything else you'd like to add for today?
No, not really. I just want to say that not about myself per se, but I want to thank you very much for what you're doing. Okay, I've said for years to people that we need to have people start doing histories of Vietnam veterans all veterans for that matter, but I mean, but within this generation and next generation, what have you, we need to get this down in modern terms, podcast, videos, however which way we do it. I said that a long time ago when I was president of the U.S. Army Ranger Association, and I had a wonderful friend named Tom Herring, who was a World War II 5th Ranger Battalion Omaha Beach guy, and to listen to some of his stories, and and we just never got to it. It was around to it, never got around to it. But this is good what you're doing. I applaud what you're doing, and I'm particularly delighted in the sense that we haven't talked about the A camp that much, but you do all this about SOG and special projects and so forth. And when I go to an SF meeting, I'll say, okay, my name is Jim Grimshaw, and I never served in SOG, like that, because I respect the hell of what those guys did and so forth. And I was never approached about it. I was, you go into special forces as an officer, there's a timing thing, and back in those days, you didn't want to be in special forces very long as an officer. You want to come in, do a tour, and get out. Mother Infantry branch wanted to control you, and unfortunately, at times I listened to Mother Infantry branch too much, but still in all, they controlled. They took that was your career management, and you better pay attention. So
absolutely.
Talk too much. Thank you very, very much, and
it's my pleasure. And like you said, I started this initially as a SOG channel, but I quickly realized that all the veterans like you that I've met on Facebook or met at SOAR or what have you, I couldn't just pigeonhole it to just SOG, because there's so many veterans, both special forces and conventional, that need to be spoken to and have their history documented, much like you. So I want to thank you for taking time to share your history with us and agreeing to share even more with us. It means more than you could possibly imagine.
Well, thank you. It's fun. It really is. And I'm looking forward to October.
I am too already. Then they are too. We've got tons of messages already saying, gosh, I can't believe we got to wait till October, but it's right around the corner, guys. It's right around the corner. So I'll stay in touch with you through Facebook and calling you, because we both realized we type too much on Facebook Messenger. It's better to just call. So I'll stay in touch with you, and we'll get a date lined up, guys, for part 2. And we'll have a good deep dive into Rangers and the A camp. And that's pretty much it, Mr. Jim. We'll close it out for today then.
All right. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Yes, sir. You have a good day.
All right. You too. Bye.